Great.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you.
How's it working out for you?
Gentlemen in the back of the
I'd
room,
like to use it unless necessary.
good evening. Welcome to the joint Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen budget hearings. Tonight, we'll be reviewing the public safety departments. I would ask that you remain standing after the pledge, and I'm going to ask that our police and fire chiefs please come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. There you go.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would ask that everyone, thank you, gentlemen. I would ask that everyone remain standing for a moment. There was a child at Osborne Hill, one of the students who had been sick for about 2.5 years, who passed away. And we didn't know this, or I didn't know this, the other night when I asked for a moment of silence for Sherry Stenick's brother who passed away. And I noted that it was particularly difficult because their mom was still alive. And obviously now, this young girl's parents are still alive, as well as an older brother. And that's got to be particularly difficult, and we want to let them know that we're thinking of them. So. Thank you, everyone. All right. As I mentioned when we were kicking off this evening, tonight we'll be reviewing the Public Safety Department's budgets for fiscal year 2013 through 2014. So we're going to start with the Fire Department, then we'll go into Hydrant and Water Service, Emergency Management, Emergency Communications, the Police Department, Animal Control, and then we'll actually do the Health and Welfare Departments. The Health Department and Human and Social Services are here this evening. Before I turn it over to the Fire Chief and Assistant Fire Chief and the Head of the Fire Commission, any board members have any comments, questions, concerns? Nothing? All right. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Scott, why don't you sit up here in case if I have a question? Okay, thank you for having us. Usual yearly budget meeting. I look forward to it. If you would like to start, whatever way you'd like to start, ask me questions or present it. We brought our budget in. I used the word excellent. We kept it very low. I believe my increase was only 1.7%. And the deputy, myself, and my staff worked on this to keep the budget down and just ask for the necessary equipment that we really need. And as we go along, there's some money that we're also giving back that things changed since we put this out, so I think that will sort of keep everyone a little happy anyway.
Great. Well, thank you. Let's, the 1.2% that you're referring to in a budget increase is about $164,000.
Yes, sir.
Increase
Yes.
over prior
Roughly,
year.
yeah.
Right. So why don't we, since you have some updated information, why don't you give us that first, and then we can go from there? If you do have some adjustments to these numbers.
Okay, and the, okay. As you know, we're 5% of the town budget, so you'll know that. Right now, we put in for 6 men in the fire academy, which raises that quite a bit. And we can save ourselves roughly $60,000. $60,000 there, which we put it in this year's budget, so it won't have to go into 12-13 budget. The other was
You mean 13-14 budget, right?
13-14, yeah, I'm
Right,
sorry.
okay.
Yep,
Not a
yep,
problem.
yep. Let me just,
Education and memberships.
yeah. Education and membership, we're turning back 15. Let me get it, I got it now here.
So if we take, of the 164 increase you're asking for,
Yeah,
if we subtract 60,000 for one member in the academy and 15,000 for training, is that what you said?
training, yes, that's training budget.
Okay, that brings us down to a net budget increase year over year of about $89,000, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other adjustments that we should be aware of?
That's about roughly the only adjustments that I see here now, because most of the stuff that we're putting in here are also increases in costs for different equipment that we need every year. So again, you know, saying I think we bought this in at a pretty good price.
So this is no new initiatives, though, Chief, right? There's nothing new this year. It's keeping operations the same as in
Just
prior.
really keeping operations, you know, up to date, what we have to do.
Okay.
And I'm, you know, and not repeating myself, but we worked hard on to keep it down, so try and keep everyone content and happy.
Thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. DeWitt?
Where does the 60,000 come out of, Chief? Is that the top regular payroll line?
I'll answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Art, you got it right in front of you there.
Chris, it's training relief, OT training relief, 51065. We
Oh, okay.
increased that up to 307, but we had anticipated an additional 6 vacancies going into 13 and 14. We have 4 at this point. Okay. Which is, there's no guarantee that there couldn't be more than that unforeseen during the year, but at this point, I think we're pretty comfortable with that.
So we're taking one person out of there, and there's,
Taking 60,000 out of there, which would be the cost of training.
okay,
during the
and
period.
and you're carrying 4 vacancies.
We're still anticipate, we still have 4 vacancies right now that will have to go to the fire academy in the fall.
So, we've had a discussion before that that it's cheaper to keep some amount of vacancies and pay with overtime. Are we,
Yes.
Yeah,
are we gonna,
Currently, currently budgeted here, there is a budgeted vacancy account, and we budget for 4 vacancies.
okay,
So
on
that
top
is
of the 4 that you could fill
But on top
going
of the
there?
4, we have an additional 4 right now that we would have to have new hirees for the fall academy class. And we had originally budgeted for 6 vacancies in that category.
Got it. So 4
See, the-
vacancies are in your planned budget and 4 vacancies to be filled.
Yes.
Right.
Got it. Thank
And
you.
the 4 that are planned was agreed upon previously, that we don't fill that and just keep it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members at this point? Mr. Kiley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick clarification on the payroll lines, which are relatively flat, if not even down a nudge on one line. And the reason for that is because we have open contracts that have not been settled, therefore the money is not allocated to the payroll lines. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? I have a couple questions, if I might, then. On the, if we turn to, it's page 175 in our budget book, it's the personnel summary.
Okay?
So we have the 2013 approved budget and the 2014 departmental budget.
What page are you on, Tom?
I'm,
74.
within the overall
I got it.
budget book,
Yep,
I'm in on
yep.
page 175 and 174, I guess it would be.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, no, I got you there.
Yeah. So, Mr. Tetro, because the contract isn't signed from July 1st going forward, there's no contractual increases in here on the firefighters' contracts, is that correct?
Correct.
So that's all covered within the overall contingency lines?
That's correct.
Okay. So I understand that. My question would be on the assistant fire chief line, right? We've had some turnover there, and new chiefs coming, or new assistant chiefs being promoted. By the way, congratulations on all your promotions. That
Thank
was
you.
nice to see in the paper a couple weeks ago. And
Thank you.
And we know a few of those guys, and they're good people.
Yes,
so
I'm very pleased with what we got. They bring a lot to the table.
That's great. What I was surprised at, what was interesting, I was looking at the budget book, and I actually had the paper where I had all the promotions in there.
Right.
And then I looked at this, and I saw that salaries were actually going up within the assistant chief line items in this budget book. yet you were just promoting new people in. So how does that work relative to salary level? Because you have people that have been assistant chiefs for a number of years, right? So they were assistant chief, they were getting increases in their pay as assistant chief.
Right.
Right? And then you have new guys coming in that I would assume come in at a lower rate of pay. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
So why is the amount going up year over year?
Some of the people have the time in other words, what is it, after 10 years, 20 years?
But I
They get an
think
increase.
Mr. Flynn's point is that there's two assistant chiefs at lower rates now.
Right, well, we had
At
two.
least. Yeah, I didn't know, right.
Yeah, no, we had two assistant chiefs I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I want to know why they went up. They're at lower
I
rates,
think we could defer to finance on this.
you know?
Yeah. Could we defer, yeah. Mrs. Gardner, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes. What happened is this is a snapshot of what we had in October.
Okay.
So this is information from that period. If something has occurred
Yeah,
after that date, it would not have been reflected in this budget.
Okay, so the fact that
Request.
there's, the assistant chief's positions are now filled with
Lesser,
less, newer people,
yes, at a lesser
At a
salary.
lesser pay.
should be a lesser salary. So, in fact, there should be additional savings against this
Yes.
budget
Yes.
by a few $1,000s for the fact that those positions should be filled at lower rates now.
Yes, definitely. And also lieutenants will be at lower rates, too.
Could we get given all that's happened there, could we get revised numbers on the salaries for those positions so that we make sure we budget those appropriately? That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions from board members? We go to, there's the capital request, which is page 176. And we typically look at these separately where they're big numbers, so does anyone have a question on the capital requests for this budget? All right, can we talk about, what is the staff vehicle? What is that?
Staff vehicle is the shift commander
Okay,
at Station 2.
No, chief,
okay.
regular call.
Well, it's a regular car, but we put it in as a staff vehicle. And then what we do is the newer cars, we move up, the older cars, we move down to, you know,
So how old is the car that this is going to be replacing?
that's a good question. We got that here. Yep.
What we do, I mean, I have a breakdown of all the vehicles.
Right.
Now, naturally, what we will do is, we take in a new vehicle, the chief or I will take the new vehicle, and then we will push one out, obviously, at the end.
If we put less mileage on it?
Yeah.
Than the
Right.
other one, so that's.
Right now, it's between a couple of vehicles here. We have a 2004 Ford sedan with 117,000 miles, and a 2006 with 112,000 miles. And I think both of those actually are refurbished police vehicles. So
Okay.
our intention is to, obviously, this year, actually, the chief would take the new vehicle, and then we push one of those out to auction.
What we do is the police vehicles with lower mileage, and we deal with the mechanic over there, and he tells us which one are in the best shape. So we take the two of them, we either give it to our building department personnel or training center personnel.
And honestly, I think in the case of these two vehicles, they're just going to auction because neither one of them really feasible to work. I know both these vehicles actually are starting to have frame corrosion and that type of thing. So we'll just get rid of them.
Great. Any other questions from board members on these items? Nothing?
If you could just,
Please,
excuse me, just
Mr.
keep
Brown.
going down the list there. Maybe just a little explanation on each one, the $65,000 hydraulic lift. If you could just, a little
Yes.
background on that.
Well, the hydraulic lifts that we have now are about 20 years old. We get them certified, which is required by law. OSHA do get them certified that they're safe. But they are aging. There's newer ones out. Did we just have them certified? Yeah, I'll be honest with you, yes. So that's where we are. We have to start thinking a little bit out of the box. They're old. You know, instead of a lot of hydraulic stuff, we raise them and we use the pins so they won't come down. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So I think it's time that we, you know, start strongly considering this. a safety factor also. We did talk, and I talked with Mr. Tetro on this, about the town garage. We talked to Joe, the Public Works Director, and that it just wasn't feasible. They use theirs all the time, and theirs are old also, some of them. And then we talked about also transferring them, Mike, up to Station 2, and they're huge. And that would take almost a half a day to get them up there, and another half day, 5-6 hours. It's not something that you just put in back of a truck. They're huge. They lift ladder trucks and you name any vehicles in the garage. And plus, if we did drive to the town garage, you got 2 people driving to the town garage, picking them up, taking them back to Station 2. It just didn't make sense.
If I could add to this too, the biggest issue we have right now with these jacks, aside from the fact that we did take them 20 years ago, we actually got them from Public Works, so they have been refurbed and they are safe. The issue that we have with them right now is these jacks, a total of 6 of them that we have, are rated for a total of 72,000 pounds. Well, the new ladder trucks are 72,000 pounds. So the rated capacity right now, the intention, this proposal here is to buy 18,000-pound jacks, which would bring our capacity up to 108,000 pounds.
But this is to replace all of them at one time.
This is
correct?
replacing all of them at one time.
Is that standard procedure? You need to replace them all at one time?
Yeah, it pretty much is standard procedure.
I think that because what would happen is you replace them one at a time, you'd be using 2 different sets of equipment here. It wouldn't be a good practice, to be very honest with you.
See, we use this as one
the-
piece when you raise a ladder truck.
These jacks also are, they're about twice as heavy as the newer ones too. So the newer ones obviously going to be a lot easier to move around, and it just makes a lot more sense. But yeah, we wouldn't recommend replacing them one at a time.
And also, as the trucks are coming in, they're getting heavier and heavier. They're not getting lighter and taller.
Any other questions, Mr. Brown? Do you have, Mr. DeWitt?
I'm fine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in previous years, we've talked about protocol changes 4 years ago, changing the districts, and we talked about a lot of different things. I vaguely recollect having a conversation last year. There were still more protocol things in place, and with all the thought of, services provided, high budgets and stuff like that, where are we on upgrading protocol or
Yeah, what I
tweaking
did
protocol?
was, I made, we had the spare ladder truck, which
Yep.
I made that, if you recall, so we wouldn't have to ask for another truck, a ladder rescue, and we put all rescue equipment on our ladder trucks, and we were running 2 ladder trucks. The reason we did this, we had 1 ladder truck covering the whole town, so we had to call on Greenfield Hill, it's out of Station 2, and the wear and tear on the truck was really going down. So what we did was I put a ladder truck at Station 1, ladder rescue truck, and also at Station 2. When we didn't have that before, you'd have just the 1 ladder rescue truck going up to the Merritt Parkway. It could be coming from Fairfield Center. And, it's just the wear and tear on a truck. Can I honestly say, did it pay off? Yes. Right now, we're having trouble because, and I didn't want to get into this, it's not really the appropriate time, but we will be back after this. I have 1 ladder truck that's really starting to age. It's going into 20 years old. So we're going to come back and ask to replace that, because you have 1 ladder truck, you just beat it up, because we're running 9,800 calls a year, and this truck travels all over town.
Right. I know we've had the discussion before.
Yeah,
If the
yeah.
ladder truck's the right vehicle for rescues and.
Yeah, we could we could do it that way. We are trying to put some other proposals, which my operation officer working on, which we're ready to propose you, but it's not in this budget to come in capital. I think the way the Assistant Chief Bisson did a great job on it, that we could save ourselves quite a bit of money. And I can honestly say that to you here. And I think when we come back after this budget season's over, you're going to be surprised. They worked hard on it. It'll still meet our needs, what we want, and what we used most of the time. Did a survey. This is what we use 85% of the time.
Right.
So I think you're going to be very pleased when we do come back and ask for our new proposal.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? One observation on the budget. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kiley, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It might be better served for Mr. Mayor or Mrs. Gardner, but can you just give us a quick update on where we are currently year-to-date on overtime? Collectively, probably the easiest way of looking at it, just where we think we're going to end up on current year usage of budgeted overtime.
Good evening, everyone. My apologies for my tardiness this afternoon. The overtime account for fire, police, DPW are all skewed significantly because of the impact of FEMA. We have not at this point pulled it out and analyzed the components to get a sense of what the overtime is, FEMA versus non-FEMA.
So let me ask it a different way. I understand that. We have the anomalies of the storms that affected overtime that are going to get netted out against reimbursements at some point in time. That's kind of what I'm hearing needs to happen to get a net true overtime expense that you can bump up against the budgeted numbers. Is that kind of sort of right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a process, it's a project that's on the sheet to get to
Right.
fairly soon, actually.
Doesn't it have to be done fairly soon, because you have to put in, yeah, I mean...
No,
most of
we
that should be done.
we have basically, we have what we're billing to FEMA, but we haven't trued up to develop a net and do an analysis. It's actually a project that's slated to begin. Caitlin and I talked about it, I guess, yesterday. We're starting it now.
Right, but if you have the amount you're billing to FEMA, then you just take the gross, subtract that out, and you have the net, no?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the reason I ask is if you add up the 6 overtime lines for the current year, it's almost $3 million, and there's always a lot of play in those 6 accounts, toing and froing from one account and getting to the other account. And there are years we've been under, there are years we've been significantly over. So having some visibility on that would be very helpful in looking at what's being requested for this year's overtime.
We'll have that to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Mr. DeWitt?
So year-to-date, Ms. Gardner's list, is it the business, I'll make sure, BUS other relief, that's 181%? Is that what we're burdening? So for Mr. Kiley, we're 181% overspent on that budget of $295,000.
Right.
So 534 right now.
Right. Which could be normal, regular overtime, or it could be FEMA to be reimbursed overtime. We just don't know the net number is what I'm hearing.
Right.
Right.
But it's
Okay.
about double now, that one line,
Yeah.
so.
And we don't know where, and we're not sure what general ledger account's being hit with it either. Right. Okay.
No, not in this thing here, but.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions, comments? One thing to point out in the budget, and thank you, and thank you for keeping the spending under control. While this budget represents something close to flat as compared to last year, right? It's going to be, once we take the adjustments that you have into consideration, let's say it's $89,000 right now, right? And then let's say there's another $9,000 to $10,000 in salary adjustment, whatever it is for the items we were talking about, okay? You're going to be, rough number, within $80,000. That isn't the true run rate going forward, though, because that doesn't include any salary adjustments in the current, for the next year, right? So the run rate going forward for the department as a whole will be higher, assuming increases in that number as part of the overall budget, correct?
Based on what assumptions you make, correct?
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page on that. Okay, and
So
we-
that's why the budget line is minus 1%.
right, right, because it's in that larger contingency number. To Mr. Tetro's point, if you're, depending on what you're assuming.
Sure.
For employee costs. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Popolowski, I
Mike-
want to make sure you have the opportunity to speak, and I know you guys have the fire
Could I
hydrants.
just, before Mr. Commissioner
Feel free.
Popolowski goes, I just want to let you know that we bought in on the fire marshals. I charge for plans to review plans now. I charge for inspections of liquor establishments and so forth and so on. And we bought in the sum of $57,274.50.
Great.
Which we charge that. I started that a
Well,
few
thank
years
you.
ago. And I have a few other things that, I'm going to put into effect that we worked on that we hope we can bring in some more money. And do I think it will happen? I don't want to promise you, but yeah, I do feel confident we can bring in a couple more.
Thank you. Where does, Mr. Mayor, to that point, where do we see that in the revenue lines? The monies that have already come in, and where are we going to see it? Is there anything budgeted for those monies?
There is a miscellaneous fire revenue line, but if we go
I
to,
think that goes in the general fund.
Yeah, but there's about 250 revenue lines that go into
Oh,
the
okay.
general
Yeah.
fund, so it should
Gotcha.
be.
we have a miscellaneous fire 42368 that has $16,000 actual for 12. Budget for 13 was 0, and budget for 14 is also 0.
Right, but it's all buried within one number in the miscellaneous for the coming years, though, right? And Chief, you just quoted a $57,000 number?
Yeah.
Is that for the current fiscal year, year-to-date?
Yes, yeah, that's last year.
Oh, that's 2012.
Yes.
So this only has 16,000 related to that. Can we find out what's going on there? Where that is, and if we have any
Okay,
estimate?
I think what it's here, see, the fire watch, we bring in money also, and the fire marshal fees, and the total income, when you add all of this up, comes to 57,000.
Great.
How it's broke down.
Well,
Yeah.
our year-to-date revenue for that line item is only $7,000.
Right.
Sorry, $9,385 in revenue.
And last year, the total, which is a final number, was 16,654, so obviously we don't know.
So there's a difference.
Right. So if we could find out where that, if we can reconcile that.
That might be one of my more fun activities tomorrow.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
Mr. Popolowski.
Thank you, Mr.
Could I, through the chair, ask Mr. Felmer for his schedule that he's working from, so I can use that to help with my reconciliation?
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that.
I just want to take a moment to thank the chief and deputy chief for their efforts to work on the budget and keep it basically flat. I know they spent a lot of hours, a lot of time working with the other officers, looking at all the different pieces to see how they can actually come in with a flat budget this year. We realize the circumstances of the economy, et cetera, and I congratulate the chief and deputy chief for really working hard at this.
Thank you, Mr. Popolowski.
And the staff had a lot to do with that, and that commissioner knows that. Some of my assistant chiefs did.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's go, I believe you're staying up here for Department number 4090, which is hydrant and water, correct?
Right. What page is that you got there?
189.
Let me go over on that.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. And after that, I'll open it up for any comments from the public on that.
Bear with me here till I get it,
Sure.
right, please.
All right, this represents a $120,000 increase or so year over year, or 7.5%.
Okay. The hydraulic company put in, which they didn't receive yet, get the approval, 15% increase. The hydraulic put in for that. So we incorporated that in there as a 15% increase. Now, if they don't get it, just take 15% back. But we did put that increase in here in case if they notified us. We get these numbers from the hydraulic company.
So this is a 7.5% increase, so are they on a calendar year and we're on a, Fiscal year?
If I could, as we develop this budget every year, this is this is always a very educated guess because their schedule is off from ours. This year in particular, they are petitioning to the DPUC for a 15% increase in October. There's no guarantee, and they probably will not get 15%, but they may get an increase there. No, last year was fairly flat. I don't think there was even a proposed increase last year, which is why this fluctuates pretty much every other year.
Yeah, just
But it
about
is a guess,
wasn't
because we're off schedule with them, so it's always hard to determine.
And we only use the numbers, what they give us. It's the only way we can to deal with that.
Questions from board members on this item? Let me ask, is this, so this isn't just water usage, this is the rental of the mains? and
Hydrants,
all of that?
you pay for your hydrants in
Right.
town. You pay for the use of the water to the hydrants. They figured out so much a foot. I have that, I don't have it here, I'm sorry. And that's how they figured out and come up with that.
But
We
it's-
met with the hydraulic numerous times.
It's with it's an inch-foot calculation, which, don't ask me to explain that.
Yeah, don't.
Right, but I guess my point is.
And there's a rental for each hydrant.
Right, there's a
Yeah.
part of this that is a fixed charge, which includes this number of feet calculation.
Yes.
Yep.
And number of hydrant calculation.
Hydrant.
This is a fixed charge. And then there's a variable cost, which would be when you actually have to use water from the hydrants for a fire.
We-
escape.
Yes, they put a meter on it.
Well, we don't pay for hydrant use, we don't pay for water usage for hydrants.
Okay,
But this, is basically the hydraulic company provides water service to the entire community, but they charge us for the safety asset of it. The safety section of this, basically, is what it is. So we're just getting a charge for the feet of water line that they have in the community
And the
and a
hydrant.
rental for each particular hydrant.
so you could use zero water?
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Or you could use 1,000,000
Flat rate.
gallons?
Yeah, we're
and
not
you get
metered,
charged.
the water that we use for emergency operations is not metered.
And we have about 1,800 hydrants in town, roughly, give or take.
Does this ever get negotiated with them, or they just set the rate and the state
There's no
agrees to it?
negotiation. I'm just smiling because we tried that a couple of years ago, and they out flatly.
The
You
DPUC
don't.
sets the rate on this,
That's a set rate by
which
them.
is Department of Public Utility Control. I can never remember what the acronym is for that.
What department do they come under in the state?
I'm not sure.
We don't
to
know.
tell you the truth.
DPUC is now called PURA, P-U-R-A,
Uh-huh.
and they report to the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection.
I think they even switched departments from one group to the other several years ago. I don't know. Public utilities.
I'm
Can't keep
supposed
up with them
I'm
today.
supposed to see Commissioner Esty in a week, so I'll
You
mention
can
it.
question them on it. But for us to explain it, believe me.
Okay. Any other questions on this item from board members? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. I'll allow public comment on these two items. If anybody has anything, please come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and state your name, and then we can go on to the next items.
Yeah, we can do this one.
Seeing none, we'll come back to the board. Anybody have anything? All right, let's go to emergency management, which is budget number 4110, which is page 192 and 193 in the budget book.
Right. We had an increase
Yeah.
for that, for $2,000 for CERT funding. That's the volunteers that do that. They have different equipment that they need. And also put into this budget was $34,000, which was for the Code Red. Originally, it was going to be put in the communications budget, but I'll let the deputy, he met with them over at the police station. I sent him over to meet with them, and he can explain it a lot better than I can because he met with the group over there, why we put it over here.
Okay.
Art?
It's very simple. I mean, I had some discussions, Chief Liddy and I had some discussions over this, and since that Code Red system is actually an emergency management function and not a police communication function, we thought it was more appropriate to take it out of the ECC budget and place it in here.
So it's just a
It's just,
reclassification?
yeah, it's a reclassification from their budget.
So which line item was it in the ECC budget that it's no longer in?
Captain Smith, I'd have to defer to
Got
him
that,
on that.
Chris?
Oh, Chief Liddy is here, okay.
Hello.
We may have to give the chief a microphone.
This will take just a minute to explain because it doesn't necessarily appear with clarity in the ECC budget. We originally were we had a reverse 911 system. We paid about $6,000 a year for the system itself, and then we maintained 12 telephone lines to maintain that system. Prior to Irene, we made the switch to Code Red, and that switch entailed about the system at that time cost about $15,000, but we absorbed it by removing the reverse 911 system and then dropping a number of phone lines. Just as Irene hit, we realized that we were going to run out of minutes, so we had to up our coverage with the Code Red system. FEMA absorbed about 95% of the cost of that coverage. So it's really coming out of a couple different line items in ECC, some phone lines, our prior reverse 911 system, and that only accounts for about half of it. We had intended to put it in this year's ECC budget, and it was a proposal, but at the last minute, through conversations with the Selectman's office, we decided to transfer it over to emergency management.
Thank you. Questions from board members on this item? What is, seeing none, what's the $34,000 pay for, and what is that expense?
That is for an emergency notification system called Code Red.
No, I understand that, but is this a service charge that is an annual charge that we're going to have to pay every year?
Correct.
Is that calculated variable cost number of minutes, or is that a fixed charge, or is this a capital outlay? What is it? Is this something we're going to see each year?
It is something that we're going to see each year. It is a service that we contract with that gives us unlimited usage of the system. There is no hardware expenses involved.
Okay. So it is actually, if we don't have any events where I need to hear Mr. Tetro's voice, it's $34,000.
Correct.
If he has to wake me up every 2 hours for a week, that's $34,000.
Correct.
To elaborate a bit, don't think of this just in terms of major storm events. Certainly that's the one that we all know about. But this has been used several times in the last couple weeks for neighborhood calls. One of the flexibilities in this system is you can literally draw a circle on a map, identify those streets that you want, and then do a Code Red call just to those streets. So when there was an incident one evening recently where a gentleman holed up with a gun in the police department was able to notify the neighborhood what was going on and ask them to stay at home and stay off the streets and take care of that. When we had a potential flood event in the next 48 hours, we were able to focus on the western end of Fairfield Beach Road and identify for those residents that they move their cars to higher ground as part of that. So we're able to focus directly in on that. Much like we did during Storm Sandy, we had one message go out to Fairfield Beach Road, another one to the beach area, and then a third one to the entire town. So we're able to focus along those things. That's one of the flexible pieces, as well as the online capability of folks signing up their cell phones. It's not just landline-based, it's cell phones, and you can sign up your email. The system allows text messages, emails sent out, as well as the voicemail messages going out.
Mrs. McCarthy-Vey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening. My apologies for my tardiness tonight. You mentioned earlier, Chief Liddy, the fact that the minutes had gone up. So when you first started Code Red, was it a smaller program, and this is now, as Chairman Flynn is alluding to, and we've discussed unlimited? What's the change there?
When we first contracted with Code Red, we bought a service plan that gave us roughly 90,000 minutes. At the time, we kind of thought that would service the needs of the town of Fairfield. When Irene hit, we realized 3 days before the storm actually hit, we were already running out of minutes. And Code Red, by contract, was able to charge us 95 cents a minute for our overages. So we quickly realized that this would be very expensive. And we called the company and we begged and pleaded with them, and we were able to up our plan prior to going over. Had we not done that, our bill would have been about $150,000 for just that storm. So we learned a quick lesson from that. We know that, with this unlimited service plan, and we kind of followed the lead of other communities, Westport had done the same thing, Stamford had done the same thing, that it was prudent for us. We have so many calls that we make, 23,000 every time we launch a call for an all-call in Fairfield.
Mr. Stone?
How do people know, or citizens know, that they can register their cell phone?
How do they know if they have?
No, how do they know that they can? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we advertise it on all our websites, the town website, the police, the fire website. We found that a significant portion of the town has figured it out and come on board. We see it usually just before any event. We have several hundred more sign on. But we periodically advertise it.
We also had a big push right before Storm Sandy with press releases going out saying, here's where you can sign up, here's where you can get your numbers on if they're not on there. So we kind of used all the channels that we had at that point. But I'll be happy to send you a personal email, Mr. Stone.
We get quite a few calls to the fire department wanting to add them to the,
We also kept it as part of our kind of our Facebook message and some of our early Code Red messages to let folks know that if you had friends or neighbors that weren't signed up, please go to this website and sign up for it. It's on the town website. There's a Code Red logo, and you can click on that and be directed to the sign-up page.
For a minute there, I thought Mr. Stone wanted to rent the list to do real estate calls. Any other questions, comments? We're on the emergency management budget in total. Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for that. We'll move on, and we're on to the emergency communications budget, which is 4150, which is pages 194 and 195. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the hard efforts through all the storms and all the events the past year.
thank you.
And good luck this evening with the storm.
Thanks.
Good evening. How are we doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you. Why don't you go ahead and drive?
Yeah, I'll just begin, and the reason I'm up here is just to remind everybody, refresh your memory, the ECC is our 911 dispatch center, and it really encompasses the fire, police, and the ambulance or EMS services. It is housed under the direction of the police department, and Captain Smith oversees it. So I will turn it over to him as well as Deputy Chief Reed for explanation.
Okay, thank you very much. Captain Smith, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me up. Sure. You know, if you look at what we did for the budget this year, a lot of the increase was due to the recent contract settlement with the ECC union during the last fiscal year. Most of the other budget lines that we put through were either at 0% or a little bit under. So I guess I would just open it up for questions that I can answer for you.
Questions for ECC? All right. Anybody? Mr. Kiley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the salary line is the biggest piece of it and it's a result of a settlement, could you just walk us through when the settlement hit and what years it's affecting and how it's driving the current numbers versus the prior year or two, please?
That might be best for Ms. Gardner to answer that in terms of how it impacts that. But the short form is that one of the reasons for that size increase is it's being compared back to the 2010 rates. So that's a cumulative increase year to year. So that's not a one-year increase.
I'm sorry, I was looking at some overtime numbers and I wasn't paying strict attention.
That's fine.
Talking about
just a
the
quick
salaries on the EEC?
Right.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
basically, they
go ahead.
went from they settled their contract this year? So the budget for last year was based upon the 2010 salaries. So the budgets for 14 includes the increases of four-year increases in one jump.
ECC was one of the unions that we agreed to a longer-term contract through June 2014.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I had a couple if no one else does. The two communications lines, should we just, I want to get my arms around emergency management and emergency communications. I now understand the red alert or the code red system. In lines 55,300 and 55,301, there are two communications lines. One of them is for 163,000, which is roughly flat with the prior year. I'd like to understand what that one is for. And then what is communications CMed, which is a $54,000 increase over the current year, and it looks to be a new line. So we seem to be doubling down on our communications costs here across these two areas, and I'd like to understand it better.
Okay, the first communication line is the one that has been in our budget for all the
Okay.
years. It covers both the police and fire landlines
Okay.
for all our facilities. It covers our Verizon costs, which are,
So that's business that's day-to-day business costs as well as 911 costs?
correct. It's
Okay.
all the phone lines, hard lines coming into all our facilities.
Okay.
We have our cellular Verizon, which does all the modems for the police car, mobile data terminals, as well as now the fire trucks have all the mobile data terminals so they can connect to dispatch, receive all the dispatch information, and connect through our records management system.
Okay.
So that's where we'll see some of that. Some other costs are some assorted costs that go with repairs, cell phone, and different items that go along with the modems and the other phones that we have. And there's also a fire department alerting system built into that does the tones to the firehouses. The other line, CMed line, is a new line that was transferred, and I'm not sure where it was transferred from in the budget.
CMed was transferred from charitable organization line. CMed is not a charitable organization. It is a state organization. It's the Southwest Connecticut Emergency Medical Center or some services or something like that, which is something that
And what does CMed stand for then, if it's not that?
Connecticut.
It's Jeff Merwin, Jeff Merwin, who is the head of CMed, is actually behind me in the
Hello.
audience here.
Welcome, Mr. Moore. Please, come on up. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for being here.
Yes, Jeff Merwin, Director of Southwest Regional Communications, also known as CMed, which is Coordinated Medical Emergency Direction or Coordinated Emergency Medical Dispatch.
What does that mean?
We provide the communication links to all the hospitals in the region. We have the communications for mutual aid intercepts. We have the communications for all the mass casualty situations. We handle all the hospital diversions. Normally, we are with the nonprofits. I come every year. But because we are basically a public service entity, we handle fire, EMS, coordinations all year round, 24/7. So discussions with my new director on my board of directors and with a couple of other people involved in the town felt that line item should not be in the nonprofit. It should be more in emergency services.
And what was this amount last year, Mr. Mayor? If we were to look in the not-for-profit, what was the,
I think it's about 52,000.
it's
It's based on a per capita formula by the state.
okay, so it's set by the state, and it's based on per capita, and this is our allotment for the town.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Quick question on communications in general. How do we go about managing our telecommunications contracts? Does the police and fire, are they doing that separate from the rest of the town? In other words, you can go out and hire a consultant that can come in and look at all your telecommunications costs, try to drive down the price. They take a piece off the top of the savings. Have we done anything like that yet?
Not in the last year. That is one of the things we've talked about looking forward, especially as we're looking at a new phone system in terms of doing that initial needs analysis, looking at all of our communication needs, both for the town and Board of Ed.
So what's the time frame on actually doing the analysis? Because regardless of the new phone system, you can get better deals and better rates, particularly on the cell phones and things like that. So what kind of time frame are we
Yeah,
looking
at this
at?
point, it's been discussed, but we haven't set a specific time frame for doing it.
Right now, is it decentralized, so everybody's kind of doing their own thing, or is somebody responsible for it?
I believe police and fire are on their own in how they look at that.
Yeah, police and fire, we work together with these costs, so they're all put in under the Emergency Communications Center. And for, such as the cell phones, we have had conversations with Don Leslie and IT, because they also use Verizon, so I know we're all on Verizon at this point.
But do you have any type of group buying, or have you done anything? Great, you're all on the same Verizon, but are you buying it together, or is it just like, hey, we all have Verizon, great, you know?
The equipment, I know the modems are unique to the police and fire now. I don't know anybody else in town that uses the car modems, because they're for our GPS and records management
Understand.
interface.
Yep.
As far as the cell phones themselves, we've been doing it on our own at this point. We don't go through IT to purchase a cell phone when we need it. We have our own Verizon reps that also represent the town. So, you know, sure.
Yeah, but they're not going to give you the discount unless you ask for it, right? Right.
Not really. In addition, though, I know police and fire last year both did sign up with Verizon for, it was called the Southwest Consortium Group Plan. For some reason, the state of Connecticut is not part of this group, but Verizon did allow us to go into it. And we got to reduce rates on cell phones, about 40% last year, I believe. And I think we both did that last year, Joy.
We didn't see that savings flow through in our financial statements, though. If we got that much of a discount on our cell phone usage, I don't see year over year a precipitous decline in our telecommunications.
No, but we did increase, I know we
You've
did
got
increase our
it.
cell
Art, you need to talk into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. We did increase our cell phones, and we were able to go to smartphones for that, for a lot of for the chief officers. As well as, if you notice too, you haven't seen a significant increase, I know, in our cell phone account, our communications account, for several years, actually.
Right, but we didn't see the savings come through, so there was some type of change.
No, we were able to do more with the same money.
Right, the question is, should you have done more with the same money, right?
And we thought that was appropriate.
But there's no single point of contact in the town that's helping manage our telecommunications costs across the town at the current point in time.
not that I'm aware of.
Right, and we haven't gone out with an advisor or a consultant. I know it's on the docket, but we haven't gone out with an advisor and a consultant and try to drive down the prices and do group buying across the town. It sounds like there's an opportunity there. Right. I don't know when the last time it was done. Do we know that?
I guess what I'm wondering right now is, I mean, most of the things that the town buys go through purchasing, so I would think that Twig has a contract for phones.
Phones and service?
Well, I'm talking about just the equipment.
Right.
You know,
Big
I mean,
savings would be
the
the service, too.
big service. We know that when we migrate away from our current system, the town, we will save money in multiple areas. But I'm not certain that, I have not personally, let me put it that way, been thinking about our internal phone system and the emergency service systems in the same bucket.
Yeah, I think
see them as two different things.
the simple answer is it's just matching up. The town has specific prices on different types of phones, and that's all tracked through purchasing with Don Leslie IT support.
Right.
So the question just is fire and police merged into that? I would think through Twig they are, but we'll go back and confirm that.
Yeah, and let me be clear. I just want to, there's really three pieces of this, right? There's the phone system itself, which we saw in the capital plan. There's like $1 million for a brand-new phone system. Okay, fine. That's, whatever that is, okay? Talk about that later. Then there's two pieces to this line. There's the actual hardware piece, which I would guess, go through purchasing in Twig Holland. And then there's the actual service piece, which is the actual monthly service fees, the monthly service charge, and really contract buying, and something as simple as looking at individual plans and making sure you're on the best plan possible.
And that is, and just to be clear, I can speak to the towns, the other town departments, and they are on that. When you, Don Leslie has like here's the different service plans for the phone types, here's what the cost is, that's all been arranged through purchasing already. So when somebody's either doing the budget or looking for a phone, it's sign up for one of these plans, here it is, so that's done. The question is it tied over with police and fire, and how does that work? And I'm just not sure. I believe it is, but I don't want to, I prefer to check and come back and confirm that.
Right.
I mean, I can say, I do know we are on a government rate plan. They have government rates that they give to municipalities, and I know we're on those plans. So I'm assuming that it's the same as what the rest of the town is doing. And I know that a while back, Don Leslie had sent out an email with the costs for the town, and we were at the same, if not below, actually, for some of the stuff that we got.
If you were below, I'd like that information.
For some of the equipment. The rates are the government rates that we get.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Bolito, and then I'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Deputy Chief Reed, you mentioned being part of a consortium that the state, for some reason, isn't a part of, but you were able to piggyback on it. Can you just explain a little bit more about what that is? Is that just for fire departments or public safety, or is that something that the town could investigate getting involved with?
I'm not sure that it's just for public safety or not. I can't answer to that.
Okay.
I do know that we all share the same government account rep for Verizon.
Right, I know that.
So we are getting, I'm fairly certain that we're probably getting the same rate across the board anyway, but I can't speak for Verizon on that. The consortium, though, did save, it saved us 35-40% or something, which enabled us to go to smartphones.
Now, so you're saying you
That was my
got
point before, too, Mr. Flynn. I don't think I explained that correctly.
was the discount on hardware or service?
There was, it was actually both.
Oh, both,
Well, yeah,
okay.
yeah, no, excuse me, I'm sorry, the discount was on the service, but the hardware we get at the government rate. For instance, the iPhones, I think we pay $49 for or something like that.
So you're saying that in
Or
addition...
even on the specials, they're $100.
Right. So you're saying that in addition to the government rate you get with Verizon service, that you also got a 35 to 40% discount by being a part of this consortium, or was that in lieu of the government rate?
No, it was an addition, it was an addition to. The government rate is usually for the hardware.
Right.
On that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got the discount on the service
So I
through this
didn't get a
consortium?
discount on the service. That's why, I mean, our communications, because the communications account for the fire department that's primarily cell phones.
Right.
And repairs, because we do tend to, unfortunately, by virtue of what we do break them from time to time. But that rate has been pretty flat for several years now.
Have you let the first selectman know about this consortium? Because it would seem that if it's something that the other town departments could take advantage of, you might have some savings right there off the top.
Yeah, I don't know that I reported this to Mike, to tell you the truth. I don't.
Yeah, again, the purchasing goes through Twig Holland.
Right.
And
Understood.
so wherever this is being purchased from, it goes through the purchasing department, so they would be aware of that, but we'll confirm that's all in place.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. Quick question, because I wasn't following it. So we moved the budget from miscellaneous to ECC. Who made that decision? Just out of curiosity?
We're talking about the CMed line?
Yeah. No, the Southwest Regional Communications Center.
That's the CMed line.
That's CMed, okay.
That was in discussions with the chief fiscal officer and myself.
Okay.
And
So-
primarily because it didn't seem to fit the definitions of nonprofits, per se.
Great, because a lot of the other ones don't either. So my question, look at page 95, right? Why didn't we move the Southwest Connecticut EMS Council? And all the other ones that are not really what I would call non-mandated or mandated.
Yeah. Simply put, we have not done the nonprofit analysis. The Board of Selectmen had a discussion based on the input from your committee. We said we wanted time to go through this budget, look at what was coming through, then go back and decide what classifications we needed. I think the committee suggested 3 categories that we'd slot these into.
Three or four, yeah.
3 or 4, and
I'm surprised to see one move. I'm glad to see one move. I'm surprised that we didn't see.
Yeah, if I may,
move.
that is the only one that is not voluntary.
That's incorrect.
No, it's not incorrect. All the others are voluntary contributions that we make at our own volition and discretion.
And we've had some bad data for the last 6 years. So we'll address that later. Oh, we can talk
I
about that
think
later.
Mr. DeWitt's right. If that would be new information.
Yeah.
What other one do you think is
We've
not
had a
voluntary?
whole, well,
2290.
Southwest Connecticut EMS Council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Several of those lines in the middle,
some
2290,
point,
2310,
the Board of Selectmen will go
2320.
back
Regional
through.
Planning Association.
I mean, like the
agency.
Stop talking altogether, please.
Yeah, the
I'm
EMS
answering the question.
Yeah, no.
Greater Bridgeport Regional Planning, Greater Bridgeport Transit, Southwest Regional Mental Health, and the one we're discussing right now.
Yep.
Mandated under state guidelines. I got them all here.
Yeah, I'm not sure they are, but we can obviously double check.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen targeted after this budget season for going through doing a more detailed review.
Yep.
We thought, given the report of your committee, that gave us a framework to evaluate our review of this during this budget cycle, and we thought we could make a more informed decision about how to categorize these after the budget cycle, and not try and rush it through in January. So that's all. I don't mean to say we consciously went back and looked at each of these and decided not to. This one popped up. We did make the move because that seemed to be appropriate. But I don't mean to suggest we did any further review than that.
That's fair.
I think that is fair as well. However, we would like a follow-up item on what is mandated versus not mandated, because that would be new information and I'll defer to Mr. DeWitt. I know Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey was on that commission as well, but I do remember sitting here for several years hearing that things were mandated, so it'd be good to know. Thank you. Any other questions on the Emergency Communications Center right now? Mr. Brown, and then I'll go to Mr. Kiley.
Well, just back up to communications if I can, 55,300. What happened between fiscal year 10 and fiscal year 11?
There was a budget error, I think, wasn't it?
You see the increase there, like 50,000? Was it budget year?
There was a budget error one year. I don't
Oh.
remember whether it was in this account or not, but we did have a communications budget error. Yeah, you guys have to, could you follow up on that, please? Mrs. Gardner? Thank you. Any other questions? I think, did you have anything down that end? Mr. Kiley?
Thank you, sir. Back to cell phones for a moment. And I do not know if any of this applies, and I do not know if Verizon has a stronghold on emergency communications, whether it's hardware, devices, services that other companies can and cannot compete with. And I do not know what prices you folks or the town in general gets on the service end of the cell phones, putting the hardware in the modems and all those things aside. But what I do know, for what it's worth, is I just did a very deep analysis at my company on cell phone services. And we found that even though Verizon has been the chosen vendor of service for many customers and companies in the Northeast for a very long time, that AT&T has made significant service strides in their offerings. And after the analysis was done, whether we were paying too much before, which increased my savings, or whether it doesn't apply to what we do here or not, in the end, we saved roughly 70% on the services, the data, the messaging, and the telephone cell services by switching carriers just last month. So maybe that's something that Twig and purchasing would need to look at, if any of it applies or if it makes sense. But it's gotten to be very competitive, and at least in my case, when AT&T came to the table, we saved a ton of money. So, for what that's worth.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Tetro?
Yeah, just agreeing with Selectman Kiley, I think it's important that the town go back and revisit this on a regular basis from that standpoint. I will say one of the benefits of having the 169 town statewide calls during storms is that we get to hear what's going on across the state. And AT&T has been one of the problem areas across the state during our emergencies. So its reliability would be the concern there, at least in terms of what we're hearing. Since we don't use it, it's not that we're experiencing it. But I still think it makes sense to review that on a regular basis and use that as a bargaining chip with our current supplier, if nothing else.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments on ECC? Any comments on page 197, their capital requests? There's about $48,000, $49,000. Radios, mostly mobile radios. Questions, comments on these items? Mr. Bolito?
Just a silly question here. There's a request to replace 17 UHF portable radios, and then right below it, there's a request for 16 radio chargers. Am I missing something? Wouldn't you need 17?
I'm just looking, because in my notes I had 16 and 16.
You think like an engineer now.
Imagine that. There's hope for me yet, huh?
So does that mean we're saving $1,000 here and that we don't need the extra radio? We're going to get here one way or another.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small amount. I just, want to make sure we have the right numbers here.
We can follow back up
Yeah, I
on
mean,
this. We
don't kill
need to-
yourself here.
Right. Can you guys just take a look and get back to us at some point, so we know?
Yeah, I had put in it was supposed to be 16 and 16.
Great,
I'll have to look
so
at
if that dollar amount should change, could you let us know?
Yes.
Thanks. There you go, Mr. Stone, we saved money. Yeah. What other questions, comments, concerns do board members have? Seeing none, I'll say we're done with ECC, and we'll go to the police department, which would be department number 4030. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for coming out.
As we're getting started, just want to acknowledge the fact that Chairman of our Police Commission, Walter Flynn, is here at the table, as is Commissioner Norma Peterson in the back of the room, and Lieutenant Perez and Officer Calamaris also join us tonight.
Thank you, and I think it's, we should warmly welcome Chairman Wally Flynn, who's been an honored member of this board for a number of years, and in fact, we refer to you every once in a while still on this board with the Wally Flynn rules, particularly regarding having handouts before meetings. So I hope you have no handouts to give to. Welcome back. Feel free. And you can use Mr. Flynn, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, not real comments on this, but I'm here more in support, and primarily it's the interest of the
Can you use
commission.
the-
Obviously,
can you-
the chief and the staff obviously did the detail on this, and the commission is more involved in policy. And we have, as you've seen in the budget, request for a new sergeant and some officers. Would point out that that's still within our table of organization. We were working a little undermanned, and this is primarily due to an attempt to provide more school security. And that may be an issue that's come up in other meetings here throughout the year. But I think that's the biggest thing in the budget this year that's really different, that is a change.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Chief McNamara, please tell me you didn't twist his arm so hard to get him to approve his
Exactly.
budget that he...
The commission meetings these days get quite physical. They get quite physical. Just before
My money's on Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, that's right. I know. Yeah, you should have seen the other guy. Just before I get started, it's been a year since we've been back here, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that over this last year, the men and women of the Fairfield Police Department have been tested in many ways. And I think we all should just acknowledge that. In fact, all the town employees, we should just acknowledge that the work, the hard work and effort that's gone in some unique circumstances throughout this year. And you know, oftentimes we get caught up in the budget, and we just take a moment to just acknowledge all the work and some horrific things that some of us have had to deal with. And it's been a year, and it's been quite a year, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that they've done some outstanding work townwide, and we should all be thankful for that.
Thank you, Chief.
So now into the next year's budget. You know, obviously, we always start out with questions if you do have any. Last year, we came in very flat. In fact, we probably came in last year under what we had asked for the year before. One of the things we did ask for last year, looked to put into it, was increase our overtime account. And we have some numbers to kind of go through that a little bit. Last year, the decision was made to keep the overtime accounts flat, so that never made it into the budget. This year, we wanted to kind of put it in there to signify the fact that that's kind of what we're spending on overtime. In fact, we might be spending a little more on overtime consistently throughout the years. And overtime for our department covers a wide variety of aspects, but what it mostly, to summarize it, it's providing the service with the men and women that need to do the job, and that's really in a nutshell. So what we find is, over the past several years, our overtime rate, our overtime amount that we've spent in 2010, or just to start with the overtime, was about $1.8 million. In 2011, it was about $1.8 million in all three overtime accounts. 2012, it went up to $1.9 million total overtime. 2013, we were approved for $1.5 million in overtime, coming from a year of 2012 where it was at 1.9. Last year, we were approved for 1.5. And this year, we're asking for almost 1.8 million in overtime, to be consistent with the last 5 years of what we're providing.
Where are you going to come in this year, Chief, against the 1.5? What's your real number going to be this year?
You know, I don't know whether, did we kind of figure out where we're going to be? We're probably going to be right around the 1.8, like we were many other times before. That's going to be a consistent number.
With assumptions that we will receive FEMA reimbursement.
Right.
So, you know, consistently over time, the overtime debate has been underfunded, or not underfunded, but we've been looking at every single year. We know what our overtime is going to roughly be, and those numbers kind of confirm that. And every year we look towards trying to come in under budget, full budget. So we look to not spend as much in those other line items to try and save here and there where we can. And we're not really getting the full picture of where we're spending our money with regards to the overtime. So that's kind of where we wanted to be. And even as we do that, when we calculate these numbers out, I think we're looking for a $200,000 increase in our overtime budget this year. That's still going to put us about $100,000 under where these other years have come in. You know, we're hopeful that we can, at the same time, fund it. We're always hoping that there's ways we can reduce it. But as even recent events tell you, overtime for a police organization comes with some unpredictability. You know, there's incidents where we can spend $6,000 in overtime in an evening, just because of the magnitude of an evening and the steps we have to take to make sure the community's safe. So that just kind of starts the ball rolling with regards to one of the increases that we asked for. And we can talk about that, but some of the other line items that you see, you might see some small decreases in our budget. They're not necessarily token givebacks. Over time, we're really looking to become more efficient with the way we handle technology. Some of the fruits of our labor are seen in some of those little decreases. We obviously hope, as the technology becomes more embedded, and I can go through what that technology is, we obviously hope we're going to see a lot more savings. We may save in positions down the line once we look at the technology really taking hold. But some of those decreases deal with the technology that we've implemented over the past year, in fact, over the last 2 years. And then, obviously, we can save the additional staffing that we're looking for in our new proposal for whenever you want to discuss that also.
Thank you. Do we have any questions right now? Mr. DeWitt.
Good evening, Chief. Chiefs. I'm surprised in your actuals for this year so far that you're not higher on your overtime. You're 103%, and we were just looking at the fire department saying they're 181%, based on, I guess, predominantly Sandy, right? I would expect to have seen you guys, I got to imagine you had as much many guys, if not more, than the fire department out there. So why are we not seeing a bigger number?
Let me just take a peek at what our actuals are. I know
Well,
you-
the data I have says you're 673,000.
Total?
103.5%. This is, how old is this, Mrs. Gardner? A couple weeks old? Oh, January 31st, so it's a month old, right?
Our figures today are 111% in one overtime account.
Yep.
115 in the other, and then in our training, we are at 69%.
Training. Wow. That's a lot different, right? So these get accrued because of, that's a big jump from January. You went to the storms would have, the budget in the
Yeah.
fire department shows, even in the month-old data we had here, it showed all that stuff, so did you not accrue those hours till later?
No, I don't.
It seems like a big jump, right?
I don't know, so you're saying the percentage of overtime used from the time you have your figures to the time we have our figures?
Yeah, it's a lot different. Like
Yeah.
that second overtime, you said 150%, Chief?
15.
115.
115. Oh, so it's not, it was 99 and 103, so not that bad.
And Nemo did come in between your numbers and their numbers.
Okay. But that's the line, in the 51,055 is where you're looking for that increase, that 200,000 increase.
51,055, yes.
Right. So you said something else that's always been a particular pet peeve with me, which is, it's hard for you guys to manage the manpower because, you just said, if I have to spend 20 guys out because there's a public safety incident, they're going to stay out there for as long as they have to. Well, you manage it by scrimping and saving on the other line items. So where are we going to scrimp and save to get that extra 200 grand? And believe me, I'd rather see it go up 300 grand and pull it out of these other line items and make this more accurate, because that's a particular pet peeve of mine. At the end of the year, we're moving laundry budgets up into salaries to reconcile, right?
Well, yeah, it's like any household, we're trying to be responsible with the money given to us. And
Right.
understanding that there is a level of unpredictability, and at the same time, understanding that there are plans for that money, for the money that we're trying to now cut and save. I'd have to look in depth. I know, we monitor our overtime regularly, and we do calculate out where those savings can be had. But
Right.
again, keep in mind, a lot of that overtime, this past year, we had a shift commander who had a long-term injury that was out, and that position is, just to kind of explain a little bit of the overtime, we can talk all night about it. In the department, in our staffing, 24 hours a day, there's a shift commander, and he or she is a lieutenant's position.
Right.
And that shift commander is responsible for the operational level of the entire department 24 hours a day, 8-hour shifts.
Right.
That's kind of a needed spot. That's a shift commander that will dictate resources depending upon the needs. There's some statutory requirements with regards to pursuits and he or she, their involvement and role in that. When one of those is taken away, we have to staff that. And obviously, since it's a lieutenant's position, it comes in at a higher level of
Sure.
overtime. So staffing that for a significant time during this year has elevated our overtime. In addition to that, our Sandy overtime was in the $280,000 range. So you're seeing a significant amount of overtime spent there. I don't know what
I'm
the
sorry,
question
I'm
was.
listening to you.
I forgot what your question was.
But you
Oh,
answered it well.
But I answered some-
No, you
whatever-
answered the basic
I
question.
answered
You're,
some-
where else is the 200,000 coming from in the other line items? But you answered it. You're going to be a good steward of the money.
Well,
and-
we're going to look, yeah, we're going to look
Right.
to do that. And obviously, it's not, incidents sometimes dictate it. We have our consistent staffing, we have things that we have to do that we can't always do with on-duty personnel.
Right.
Some of the luxuries and some of the things that residents enjoy in town, our Neighborhood Watch program that requires a FaceTime with people and sending officers out into the neighborhoods to meet with them at different hours oftentimes could require overtime to do that. You know, we found out recently and received quite a few emails with regard to our Neighborhood Watch program to ensure that it continues and the value people have in it. And we acknowledge the value, though, and that wasn't because of overtime that they had concerns, but all those kind of programs really some things you don't really think about may require those officers to be on an overtime basis because they're taken from their regular jobs to do those other jobs.
Sure.
Because sometimes we don't necessarily have the staffing to make specialists. So you can do your job here, and then at some point we may ask you at other hours to do other things for us.
Right.
And that's kind of our overtime, in addition to the crisis that may occur, and we've seen that in the last several weeks, where we have an incident occur.
Sure.
There's a public safety issue, and, you know, and we have to deploy the resources we have to deploy just to handle the situation. So there's a lot of unpredictability with
Sure.
with some of
Understand. How many how many planned vacancies do you have? And how many are you going to fill, right?
We have been running with 2 vacancies for the last several years, so we still have those 2 vacancies. Keep in mind, and as years go on, it's going to be forgotten, but we used to have an organizational table of 108 officers. Somewhere along the line, that was only funded to 107 officers. So in essence, our table of organization was dropped by 1 several years ago, yet the demand for services and things have not. And so out of that 107, we have 105 officers that are staffed. We have 2 vacancies. I like to say we have 3 vacancies, 2 of them funded, 1 that has just gone by the wayside.
Right. And that's what we're talking about with overtime earnings, right? Those 2 vacancies are basically, they're needs, they're just funded by overtime.
Yeah, they
Existing
would-
officers with overtime.
Partially, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
they would fulfill those roles within there.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Chief.
Mr. Stone?
On crossing guards, that's school-related, right?
Well, yeah, it's the men and women that cross the children in the morning and afternoon to get to school.
So why is that in your budget and not in the school budget?
You know, I think it just found its way to our budget. I know, I think it's consistently been in our budget. There was a period of time that the town looked towards hiring an outside contractor to fund that. And, I mean, that was a dismal failure. And so when it came back to us, it just came back into our budget, and we funded. I think part of the reasoning for it was that we were more able to cover posts at one time if a crossing guard was unable to make their post, that they would notify us, it's all under our roof. We would have an officer go there if it was a serious situation, and they could cross the children. And that's the only rationale I could give you. I don't have the historical nature of why it sits on the police side.
It just seems to me it should be in the school budget, but that's my opinion.
Who manages the crossing guards?
It falls under Lieutenant Perez in Special Services, one of the divisions within the department.
That's why it's budgeted there.
And we have a coordinator. We have a crossing guard coordinator who also doubles as a crossing guard.
You can't have the budget sit in another department and have you manage it, right? I mean, that's the reason
if it were to go to the Board of Ed, we would certainly turn all rights and privileges and all that goes with the crossing guard program right over to the Board of Ed.
Sounds like you would happily do so.
No. It's you know what it
Sounds
people
like
people
Lieutenant
oftentimes
Perez would happily do so.
You know what it is? It's I don't know that we have a lot of no-shows in the crossing guard program. It's kind of one of those things that they do their job and show up and go home, and they're great at it.
Did we have a question over here, Mr. Bolito?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to thank you for the police department comparison report that you provided. We got it today, and I haven't had a chance to read through the entire thing yet, but it's very helpful to kind of see where we're at compared to other communities. And I'm looking specifically at page 5, the number of sworn officers, where you compare us to other towns, we're very low. And I think we've kind of known this as we're going along. That ties me into the 2 new positions that are in the budget, the one for the police officer and for the police sergeant, right?
There's actually 4.
There's 4 total?
Yeah.
I must be missing the other 2. Okay, well, be that as it may, 4 positions. I've heard that they're related to the school security, which obviously, being parents, is something we're very in tune with, and what happened in Newtown was a real eye-opener. And certainly from an emotional standpoint, as parents, we're like, do whatever you need to do to make the schools more secure. But on this board, we have to put the emotions aside and kind of ask, you know, what are you going to get that you wouldn't have gotten if you didn't have these positions? So that's really my question, is what will these positions enable you to do that you can't do now?
You know, first of all, school safety and school security is not something that we thought of December 14th. And we in the Fairfield Police Department have been working for many, many years on school security issues and school safety issues, and been conducting training, been really trying to bring awareness to the fact that, like it or not, our schools are, at times, and now we see why, vulnerable, a vulnerable place to be. We have 2 high school resource officers that have been in the schools for several years. We have our resources dedicated to the school prior to December 4th of 2012. We've had 2 school resource officers, 1 in each high school, for several years, doing a great job interacting and, you know, serving a variety of other purposes. We've had in the past, and we maintain 2 DARE officers. Those DARE officers obviously teach the DARE program to our 5th graders, 6th graders? 5th graders. Some towns use 6th graders. And then what we used to have was an officer-friendly program that an officer would be in the schools K through 3. That was eliminated. That position was eliminated due to budget constraints. We just couldn't continue to maintain it. So in essence, we had 5 officers dedicated to the school board. Now we're down to 4 officers. But at the same time, we acknowledge the fact that school safety and school security, if you look at the last, since maybe 1999, the trend towards school safety and school security is very important. And it's important to note because although, and I agree with you 100%, that there is a big emotional toll taken for several reasons. One, because it's so close to home. We know people. Some of us were there, but others know people and probably have friends that are more personally affected. And when it happens so close and of such brutality, it really does play into it. We're not acting on that emotional toll. And, you know, it might be easy for some to sit there and say the police are overreaching and overreacting to play on that. We're not. And it's important to note that. It's that we've been trying to do the best we can to keep our schools safe for the last 10, 15 years. And that included training all the personnel, training administrators, and training teachers. When you start to look at the Sandy Hook incident, you start to realize that it opened up a whole new threat level for us. We knew it was always there, but now when it starts to hit towards a grammar school level, you know that it's towards one of the most vulnerable populations within the school districts. We, over the past several years, have been looking towards how could we mirror a school resource program in our middle schools. Not only because we think it's a good idea, but because parents and teachers and others have been coming up saying that that's a very formidable year, not only for good, but for also bad and behaviors. And you look at the influence that police officers can have in interacting and becoming part of the school atmosphere. So we've looked towards that. Some of the things we've done that don't cost any money is we're looking at the middle schools to open up space for our DARE officers. So the potential exists when our DARE officers are not doing DARE, they may have a place to go, and again, just to have a presence at the schools. When you start now looking at the most vulnerable of our population when it comes to our school population, and we have about 12,000 people that we're responsible for in our schools, about 10 to 11, maybe 10 to 10.2 students, and then I think about 1,700 administrators and staff within the schools, and including when you start talking about the district offices. So you start looking at a large population of individuals in town every day that we don't have anybody focusing specifically on. And when you looked at Newtown, and the effects that had on Newtown, and not just the emotional effects, but we really look at it from a security standpoint, and have had meetings with Dr. Title and the First Selectman and others, and really looking at this as a global approach to it. This is our approach towards school safety. You really have to look at it as 3 tiers since Newtown. And why are we talking about it now? Because we have an audience again. Again, we've always been concerned about school safety. We now have more of an audience because it's come into everybody's concern. Our first tier was to look at what our existing buildings have. Now, we have 17 public schools and 10 private schools that we're talking about, so 27 buildings that we're looking at. And if I forget to, I want to include in there our town buildings, and I'll touch on our town buildings and how that plays into our school security. We have 27 buildings that we are looking at right now to do security surveys. 2 of our officers, Lieutenant Perez and Sergeant Lucier, have been going building to building, looking at doing security surveys on each of the buildings. Again, if you look at some of the other towns, you look at towns that have subcontracted that out. You know, some neighboring towns have contracted $50,000 to hire a firm to come in and do security surveys. We looked at it as having people in-house to do that. And if you extrapolate it out, we're saving several $100,000 doing it in-house rather than saying a company come in and do it. The benefit of having your police officers in your town do this is because it's not only doing a security survey. I mean, these officers have been in town for 20 years working in town. It's also building relationships. And one of the big things that we need to understand is it's the relationships that are going to help us here. So the first thing is security surveys, and that's tier 1. We've already started those. We've completed, I think, our initial round at each of the schools, and that will deal with what exists now and then what we can do moving forward, either minor little adjustments that can be made or, you know, up to the major adjustments maybe that would require some significant financial contributions to do. That's the first tier. The second tier we look at is we've gone around to every school, and I believe we've hit every school by now. We've done every school. We started at the top with the district office and all the staff at the district office and all the administrators with the consistent training and a consistent message going off that priority number 1 in our district is to have a safe district. It starts with a coalition, really, of the town government, the First Selectman's office, the Board of Ed and the Superintendent's office, as well as the police department and, frankly, the fire department, because fire plays a significant role in school safety. And we're looking at our second tier being training. And that training's going on for teachers, administrators, staff, and we've really hit every school. Our next phase is looking at the bus drivers, and then at some point we'll touch on the crossing guards and those people that interact with students periodically during the day. That's the second tier of that. The third tier we're looking at, and some of this stuff, please understand that I'm going to be very vague on because for obvious reasons. But I think the third tier, to best describe the third tier, is information sharing. And it's not that it's not intelligence as much as it's having a relationship between the Board of Ed and the staff at the schools and law enforcement, so that we make sure that we're properly sharing information. And if there are situations that arise that require our help, that, number 1, we're aware of it, and number 2, we're working collectively to address it, so that problems don't rise up. And we've seen that in our school resource officers at the high school level. The officers are in there building relationships. They're not in there to make arrests of students who are violating school policy. They're really in there to have a presence and to build relationships not only with the staff but also with the teachers and the students. And we've seen that to be very effective. And the school resource officer program is a nationwide, and really that's where most high schools are at right now. That third tier is really information sharing. On the same part, we have to make sure that we're doing all we can to share with the schools what we might be experiencing on the weekend that might be important for them to know. So that's our initial approach. Then we looked at how can we effectively continue to make these 12,000 people safe on a daily basis. And we've looked and analyzed around the state what other municipalities are doing, and they really run the gamut. Some are hiring armed guards that have no affiliation with law enforcement. That means that I can't vouch for their training. I don't know necessarily their background, and they're very limited in what they can do. Some are doing officers at every single school in their district. So we looked at understanding that we have to be fiscally responsible, but at the same time have to address a concern, and it's not only a concern of ours, but it is a concern of the community. So we looked at modeling our approach to model it after our traffic safety unit. And tell me if I'm being too overly long here, because I will.
Appreciate it. Yeah, please go ahead.
Over the last 2 years, or 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we looked at one of our number one problems in town, or one of our number one complaints in town, was traffic safety. People were continuously calling us about speeders in their neighborhood, people violating the law, cell phone use, not necessarily lack of seatbelts, but cell phone use, reckless driving, whatever it might be. And so we looked at what our ability was with the staff we had to address that issue. Number one complaint in town at the time. So what we did was every officer can enforce traffic laws. However, every officer that's on the road right now is in between potentially stopping a motor vehicle. They're responding to calls for service. And if they respond to 10 calls for service, or if they respond to 1 call for service, that call could take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours to handle. So that officer, in essence, is off of doing anything else but handling those calls. It may take even more than 2 hours. So there may be some traffic enforcement in between some of these calls for service or some of the other details they're doing, but their main focus was not traffic safety. We carved out from our existing staff 4 officers and a supervisor. Their sole purpose is to deal with traffic safety. Not only enforcement, but also education, and to work with the town engineering to see whether or not there are some issues that require different signage. They work with the police commission on doing that. And as a result of that unit, we've seen somewhere between roughly a 10% decrease in our accident rate from last year to this year, which is fairly significant when you start looking at safety while operating a motor vehicle, because that's their only focus. We've also seen their activity and the level of enforcement increase as a result of that being their only job. What we've also seen is our complaints on traffic issues go down, and that was really what drove us in the first place, is there are not as many complaints. These officers are recognized in the state. They received awards as the #1 department in the state for occupant safety enforcement, meaning seatbelt. They've also been recognized statewide for our size department. They came in second for overall traffic safety approach. So they've had a significant impact on traffic safety. They've, at one point, we're number 4 in the state for cell phone violations or distracted driver violations, which we all know is an ongoing problem that continues ongoing. We want to model, or our first initial plan was to model a school safety unit similar to that unit. So we're not looking for officers in every school. What we are saying is that this population, given what recently happened in Newtown, given the vulnerability and the level of brutality that occurred to such a vulnerable population, we don't have the luxury of saying, well, chances are it might not happen. We don't have that luxury. We have a population that we feel needs some extra service, and that's where we came up with this, what we feel to be a pretty adequate plan to address those needs, trying to be as fiscally responsible as possible. And again, this is our initial plan. This is the highlight of what that plan would look like. Taking 3 officers and a sergeant. Those would be new positions. 3 officers and a sergeant?
Yeah,
Sorry, I
3
apologize.
officers.
I'm getting confused with the traffic, yeah. Combine them, and here's where I'm getting confused. Combine them with the 2 school resource officers that we already have at the high schools to make that a 5-person school safety unit. Those 5 officers, a sergeant and a sergeant, and 5 officers. I know, my math is, now you know why I'm a police officer.
I'm going to start questioning your entire budget.
I know, I'm screwing up numbers in a budget meeting, I apologize. We're looking at 3 officers and a sergeant, combining them with the 2 school resource officers that we have. So it would be a 5-officer, 1-sergeant unit, and their sole responsibility would be not only to have a presence. When you start looking at crime prevention, because that's really what it comes down to, crime prevention, not only having a presence at the 27 schools or at the 17 public schools that we have, and again, we have 27 public and private schools, not only having a presence there, but also having an interaction there and fulfilling that third tier of what we're looking at for school safety, is that relationship building and sharing of intelligence and problem solving at the level that it should be at, so that we ensure that nothing goes unnoticed. You know, some of what we've learned, and I have a little bit of it right here, if you give me just a second, and again, this is dated information, but if you start looking at some of the studies that were done on school safety, and if you look at a study from 2002 by the Secret Service, again, we've been doing this for quite a little time. The Secret Service did a study in 2002, and I won't go into the entire study, but when you start looking at why it's important to have officers in the schools and why it's important to have those relationships, one of them, they had 10 key findings for safe schools back in 2002. And they looked and they studied schools, and one of the things that we know about some of the targeted violence when it comes to schools is that they're rarely sudden, and they rarely were they sudden impulsive acts. In other words, they're always or oftentimes comes with leakage. And what leakage is when students, and I know we're talking specifically about a student threat, but where leakage, people oftentimes talk about it before they do it. And you've seen that over the time with some of the school violence incidents where people will come up afterwards and say, you know, he did say something, or I just didn't recognize it. And there were signs and signals that if an officer is there engaged, we may be able to prevent it. And then most attackers engaged in some behavior prior to the incident that caused others concerns or indicated a need for help. Again, this is a Secret Service study. Most attackers had difficulty coping with significant losses or personal failures. Moreover, many considered or attempted suicide. I mean, these are not pleasant topics to talk about, but I want to kind of share with you that this is not an impulsive reaction on our part, on an emotional side of it. I mean, clearly we all have emotional feelings as a result of the Newtown incident, but we've also taken those emotions out of it and looked at a vulnerable population within our community and how best can we provide a level of service that we think that they need. In addition to that, and I don't know whether any of you were there when we talked to the RTM with regards to how meetings are held and some of the problems that may occur at meetings in violence because of incidents around the country. We also want to utilize this unit as a group that can also go around towards our public buildings, specifically the libraries and the town hall and Independence Hall. You know, those are other areas that we would see a need for them to continue working with them also.
Mr. Bellino?
Chief, thank you very much for that. It certainly puts my mind at rest knowing that you have a very specific plan of action here that's modeled after something that's been successful in the past, and I greatly appreciate you going into the level of detail that you have. I know you can't go into everything for, you know, obvious reasons, but one thing that I was curious about, though, is that we also have 2 universities here in town. I know they have private security as well, but how do they factor into this, or do they, into this plan?
You know, we have a great relationship with both universities. Both of them have different levels of security.
Right.
Fairfield University has a more intense security program, and Sacred Heart has a different approach to security. We work well with both of them. I can tell you that we've been in discussions since Sandy Hook with both to see whether or not we can improve the way we operate together. But, you know, they have their own security forces that on a regular basis will provide the service that they need. However, realistically, our services are always called upon for both universities, be it for whatever issue, and should an incident rise up to a level that we would have to respond, as we've seen at Fairfield University many years ago, we work well together. However, they do the day-to-day grind of security at the schools and at the universities, and we provide the law enforcement. They do not have any law enforcement powers at either university, so we're tasked with providing service to both universities. And again, those universities, since they have their own, I'm not saying that we would take this school safety unit and expand it to the universities. This is really just for the schools within the town, not the universities.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions, Ms. McCarthy-Vahey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question about the DARE officers, since they weren't in your count for that unit. So how do they fit, or where do they fit, or
Well,
do they fit?
adding two more to the difficulty math I was having was difficult, but clearly the DARE officers would be rolled into that also. But however, they have a specific role already. I wouldn't want to water down their role as DARE officers. What I would like to do is they would be part of the unit because they would be officers that are already in the schools. However, they would maintain their role as DARE officers. The minute you start peeling away from the program that they have, their program is a very busy one and very on schedule. They're more like police officers / teachers. They have a regular schedule to follow. So although they would be rolled into that traffic safety unit, the school safety unit, they wouldn't necessarily be doing a different job.
And thank you for that. Just a follow-up comment, when you were talking about the school safety unit, you talked about the relationships and kind of the leakage and those conversations. And certainly as a parent in the school and as someone who has sat here and looked at the school side budget, I'm thinking about our school psychologists and school social workers and the folks who are in another role in the day-to-day information gathering and sharing. And I think it would be important, and this is perhaps, I see the chairman of the Board of Education, and I think there may be another member or two. Oh, there we go, the vice chairman, thank you. That if we're going to go forward with this, that we be sure to leave intact those resources in the schools as well, because they're certainly an integral part of this plan.
Yeah, this isn't meant to replace any of the more trained behavioral personnel that are in the schools. It's really to enhance it. And another thing to understand, we're doing security surveys, that first tier of our approach to school safety. That kind of should be an ongoing process. However, we're taking officers that, lieutenant and a sergeant that have other jobs within the department and asking them to manage what they're doing and also amp this up to the top of the list. So they're doing that. However, that should be a continuous thing. So the hope is that this three-tier approach becomes one of their assignments on a regular basis. So it's an ongoing security survey, security assessment, but it's not meant to replace any trained psychologists that would be in the school right now. What it is meant to do is to make sure that all those people who have little pieces of information are communicating effectively and regularly and are problem solving. And oftentimes what we find is that sometimes one side doesn't really know what the other side's doing, and we think it would be more effective if we all knew what we were doing. I do want to say that we have very safe schools. I don't want to limit or give an impression that that the administration or the staff in the schools do not take very seriously the level of safety that they need. They are very receptive. They are very highly trained. What they lack is a law enforcement presence that we believe should be an integral part of the schools.
Any other? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. Chief, whenever we talk about new officers and new, policemen, police women, we always talk about the academy, going to school. So will these 4 people come from, so money shows up tomorrow, do these 4 people come from your internal workforce today, and we hire 4 new people for the beat cop, if you will, excuse my, if that's a bad term, or do these 4 people get recruited, go to the academy, and there's a lag time?
Yeah, this is, obviously, to get new officers, there is a time period from hire to training. So the reason that it's in here now, and we're still finalizing some of our internal workings of how it's going to work, is because there is a lag time. We need to hire officers. It's going to be a period of time before these officers are hired and trained, and we can take other officers to fulfill those roles. Unfortunately, you can't staff this position without getting new officers to backfill the other officers,
Sure.
or you do it on an overtime basis. So
Right.
it really becomes a thing that moving forward requires the time to fill the spots. But again, keep in mind, we cannot be reactionary, and we can't let, time and distance always plays into these things. And, the more time that leaves Sandy Hook, the Sandy Hook tragedy, and the more distance after that happens, people oftentimes go back and come back into a comfort level, and we want them to.
Right.
We don't want them to be always at that state of concern. We have to be at that state of concern. We don't have that luxury of ever saying, boy, that just happened a year ago, and it's tragic, and we remember it, but, we're going to go back to where we are. We can't. We have to look at these incidents and look at moving forward. So if it takes a little lag time to get to where we want to be, that's okay, because moving forward, we have to always maintain that level of security. So either we're going to kind of move in that direction and get there, or we're not going to move in that direction. So that's why I acknowledge the fact that this is not something that's going to happen overnight. But if we are going to move forward in it, we kind of have to start moving forward in it with the funding to start that process.
So funding starting in July of 2013 gets us these 4 people 2014-ish, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's probably not this year, right?
Yeah, probably not. We'll look at some of the other ways to go about hiring officers. Sometimes there's lateral
Sure.
transfers that officers may come here that are already certified. But to answer your question, yeah, there is going to be a lag time of when those officers will be in the door. However, this is one thing we're doing today. Tomorrow we'll be reviewing some of the security survey plans. If we don't move forward with this plan, we'll look at using the resources that we have. I think that this is the most appropriate plan moving forward. I acknowledge the lag time, and we understand that some of the things we've put in place right now will have to continue until we have this unit up and running fully. We have taken steps to temporarily increase our presence at the schools the best we can, and we probably have to continue to do that until this unit is in place.
Yeah. No, I very much appreciate the fact that there's not 17 new officers in this plan, and I like you modeling that off the other team. I think it's a great approach, and I don't want to. I'm not being discouraging about the lag time. It's just a reality of the process, right?
It is, and then the other thing to keep in mind is that this is not that these officers are being hired to fulfill this unit. This isn't a unit that we get for a year and then yay, we have 4 more officers to do other things with. This is moving forward. This is what we believe we need, and that's where these officers will be assigned, and that's their function. It's not get them for a little period of time and then move them somewhere else. It's really to deal with this, with our school population.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd just like to personally, and I'm sure we all do, want to thank you for your assistance that you gave Newtown during that time, along with your detectives, motorcycle police, and everyone else, your whole department that was involved. You guys devoted a lot of expertise, time, resources. You were called upon, and you came through, as we knew you would. But I feel it's appropriate to thank you for that. So just a couple questions. One is, Can you get specific? I'm sure you've talked to other chiefs right across the state, and I'm sure every municipality, even maybe possibly municipalities that haven't even thought about something like this, other chiefs, and I'm sure Newtown didn't think about something like this, right, to increase school security. But Westport, Trumbull, New Canaan, Darien, wherever, have you talked to them and discussed their plans and what they plan on doing? And is there anyone that's not doing anything? They're just kind of keeping it a status quo?
You know, I put something out to the Chiefs Association in the state, and what I can say is that it runs the gamut. I think Monroe is looking to put officers in every single school, right? Correct. Yeah, I think Monroe is one that sticks out as doing that. I'm not sure what Westport's doing. I believe Westport was looking at armed guards, or I know that Westport just contracted out with a contractor to do a security survey, so I don't know whether they're waiting to do that. I think every department in the country will look at their security plans for their schools after Sandy Hook, but I don't have concrete what every other department's doing. And I can find that out. I did put it out there to kind of get an understanding of it, but at the same time, you know, we looked at what we should do. You know, so we really looked at it, and we feel this is the best way moving forward. But I think you're gonna run the gamut.
So what this is, if something were to ever occur, you got a phone call or that there was a potential incident, it's a race against time at that point, right? And seconds would count. So how long does it take you right now, do you think, to get to a school, as opposed to if you had this plan, unless someone happened to be there, to get to a school?
You know, we're probably at a 3-minute response, if not sooner. You got to understand. Forget about the school safety unit for a second. You were probably at a 3-minute response. That's kind of why when we talk about law enforcement training, one of the things we did several years ago was you know, and it's public knowledge, so I'll talk about it. You know, we put patrol rifles inside every police vehicle, and I don't know whether we've had that discussion when we did it, but I'm sure we have about amping up our ability to respond to a crisis. We train our officers in these patrol rifles because what we do know is, now I'll specifically talk about Sandy Hook, the weaponry utilized there, we have to match. We have to be able to deal with a situation with more firepower than just our handguns. So all of our patrol cars are stacked with patrol rifles, and the majority of our officers are trained to utilize those patrol rifles. We are currently training the rest of our staff. It's part of an ongoing thing to improve the entire department to function that way. We also train in a variety of techniques utilized to handle some of these situations. We've been doing that for several years. So we are prepared to respond. We're at about a 3-minute lag time. Now put in the school safety unit. If we wanted to put an officer at every school to reduce that time, we'd put an officer at every school. This unit will serve several purposes, one of them being visibility. The idea, and again, this is hiring the staff and then working through the procedures of it, but you know, one of them is high visibility. One of the ways to prevent these is to ensure high visibility at the schools, so that if somebody were to think about doing something at a school in the town of Fairfield, one thing they may see is a police officer there. What they'll also see, that's why we do training, is a well-trained staff that reports suspicious behavior. That's why we do training. That's why we talk to parents about new rules and regulations and new procedures in place so that they may be a little more inconvenienced, but this is the new normal. So that's the presence there. The other big part is that third tier is that interaction. So there, with 5 officers at 17 public schools, you're not going to have an officer at every school. So you may reduce the response time a little bit, but it's more than just response time. It's preventing it before.
Preventing.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any more questions on this particular topic. So if you want to move on in case somebody else does, I just have other
Mr.
questions.
Kiley, is it relative to this topic?
It is, thank you.
Please.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Brown. I'll come back
Thank you,
to
Chief, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight and for all you do. Two questions. Number one, I'm thinking back to years past when there were some federal grants. I think they were called COPS grants at some point in time, going back 10, 15 years. Has there yet, have any grants, federal or state, yet surfaced to help increase school security that would potentially offset some of the costs for some of the new hires that we're thinking about doing? Or is it too soon for that? I mean, it's
No,
Washington.
I know that there is discussion with regards to some of the COP grants. You have to understand with the federal government the way that it is and funding the way that it is, some of the Department of Justice funding is still up in the air. I know that as a result of Sandy Hook, there has been some discussion that the new COP grants would be towards putting officers in the schools. There was a program that was not funded in 2012, and I don't know whether as a result of Sandy Hook it will be funded, that dealt with school security, not from a manpower or officer standpoint, but more from a physical security standpoint. So we are on top of looking towards that, but I don't know necessarily whether there's anything out there just yet.
Okay, good, thank you, because I know in years past, we did take advantage of a few COPS grants to make some new hires.
Sure.
And it worked out quite well for us. We were able to get our new guys on board, and I think they were paid for a couple, 3 years or something
Yeah,
like that,
yes,
right?
yes.
And my second question is, I wonder if, let's assume for a second that this is the appropriate process for us to go through, the road to go down. If that all is true, and this is the right program for us to follow, in consideration to the time gap that Mr. DeWitt was talking about a few moments back, is there anything to gain by possibly taking this request outside the budget process, possibly through a special appropriation that could be acted upon sooner by town bodies and maybe buy a couple, 3 months to close that gap? Does any of that make sense, either administratively or financially, or possibly get you to school by September sooner?
You know, I think that would be discussion that would have to be had amongst bodies other than just us. And, you know, I believe, or we believe, that this approach is the most appropriate approach to take, given the number of schools that we have in the district, given the population, and given the atmosphere and the potential. Yeah, sure, the sooner that we put this in motion, I believe the better off we are. But again, you know, yeah, we'd be willing to kind of get this moving as soon as possible. So if there was a way to get it moving more quickly, and that was the appropriate way that people wanted to move,
right,
that would be, you know, we would certainly be up for that. I don't necessarily, excuse me, I don't necessarily think that, I think if we understand that this is moving forward, we're going to start that process before the July 1st. We wouldn't have the bodies in hand, but we would certainly have the process in place by July. In other words, if we get an indication that this is going to be passed and we're going to have the staffing levels to do that, then we'll start that process. The funding really wouldn't come in until July or later by the time we hire. So,
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on this topic? Seeing none, we'll go back to Mr. Brown, who had a question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just referring to your police department comparison report, and I noticed in one of your graphs, it's on page 6, the Fairfield Police Department calls for service trend. And that line, I guess it's unfortunately, is going up. And I'm curious as to why. I mean, it's not only up, but it's up quite significantly. I'm sure there's many reasons, but can you pinpoint anything or explain? Is there any explanation for that?
You know, the first selectman asked that question also. You know, I think part of it, I don't. I think overall, it's just our demand for services is increasing. Some of it can be attributed, again, I don't have a percentage-wise, but because of our traffic enforcement unit and the more activity that they're doing, that could be part of it. In addition to that, some of our community outreach, we really have done a pretty good job with getting people to report things when they see it. And maybe there's some more self-reporting that's going on. But other than that, I really can't nail down in one word or another why.
Just, calls for service shouldn't equate to crime levels. They're very dissimilar. A rise in call for service can be a very good thing because people are using us more and calling us more for those little incidents.
Okay. Okay, and then, one more question?
Sure.
The departments, the population and the number of sworn officers is the table right above the graph. Is that the one I want? Hold on a second, I'm not sure if that's what I want. What I'm looking for is a graph that shows the number of police officers that we have compared to other towns.
Page 5. That's it. Page 5?
Yes, page 5. Now, how does, it's difficult, right? How does a town determine what's the right amount of police officers? Take away what we just talked about, a new task force, right? I mean, here we have 170, you said at one time it was 108, and, whereas Greenwich had significantly more, I think that's on a different page. I mean, how do different municipalities figure this is how many officers we think we need to fund and how many officers we need to have in town? There has to be some discussion behind it, but it's almost like all over the place.
Yeah, I think it would be, the service that's demanded or the service that you require. I don't have handy right now in front of me per population what the recommended per population is, but clearly it's the level of service that a community wants and that we provide.
Okay.
I know I'm not giving you a good answer for it, but for the amount of service, we provide a lot of services, and sometimes people don't really understand the level of service that we provide. And it's either you give us more officers for service that you have, or you provide more overtime for the service that you want, or you just move back on the services that we provide. And I know I'm not giving you...
What we're saying is community-driven, in a sense.
Yeah, we point that out because there's a lot of things that,
Yeah, look at
there's a
Greenwich.
lot of things that we don't have, that other departments may have. Different units that the officers, that many departments may already have that we don't have. And some of them I won't go into here. Within our investigative unit, there's some departments that have fully thriving staffed narcotics units. We don't have that. We have some of our detectives that do a great job with narcotics, but we don't have a unit that focuses strictly on the narcotic problems. Now, what does that equate to? You get the services of one detective who recruits other detectives within the detective bureau if he has a case, and they move forward and they make arrests and they do investigations. So it's that kind of staffing levels that allows you to do different things and provide different services to a community.
Okay. And we have one K-9 unit?
We have one K-9 unit, and in that K-9 unit, keep in mind the dog as well as the vehicle and the training and the ongoing expense for that K-9 unit was all done through donations. So that was not impacted upon the town.
All right. Thank you.
Mrs. Alvin, any questions?
Less of a question and perhaps more of a comment as a follow-up on Mr. Brown. I look at these numbers and had similar questions looking at the different towns and the number of officers. And actually, the note that I wrote earlier this evening, I was interested to know what we were or not doing that some of these other towns may be doing or vice versa, what are they doing? And I think that's what these numbers tell us, that we don't know enough about what's going on in these other towns. So there isn't a common form to be able to measure Town A against Town B, is what I see in these numbers.
Yeah, this was more of a guide. This wasn't, oftentimes we get questions over the last several years as far as our staffing levels and as far as our overtime levels. And I'll acknowledge that there's a lot in here that's not explained. This is just a snapshot. If I am not by far saying that in the next 5 years we should have 135 officers to be like any one of these towns, but I wanted to provide you some sense of, what other departments have. There are certainly more digging that would have to be done if you were to make decisions based upon just this chart. And I wouldn't want you to just make decisions on that chart, but I just wanted to provide, or we wanted to provide at least some basic knowledge as to what other towns and communities had as far as officers go.
Chief, would it help
Thank
to point out the index in the back that breaks out the different units by town?
Yeah, we did, if you turn to some of the other pages.
Right.
Page 11, perhaps.
Page 11 and moving forward. So if you looked at Hamden Police Department, and again, though, this was just information to be provided. We'd still probably have to dig deeper, but that kind of gives you some of the services that other departments provide that we may or may not provide.
I just follow and comment, again, agreeing with that. This is all very good information. It's nice information, but I don't think it's information that I would myself, I'd read it, it's nice information, it doesn't tell me enough. If I were to look at information that the state provides for other things that I'm very familiar with, it's based on a specific formula. This is not. So it's good information, but it really doesn't, it's not definitive, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Any other comments? Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as a follow-up to Mr. Brown's question, Chief, you said that you didn't have on hand the kind of recommendations per population. Is there an agency or authority that recommends a per population number? Or I wondered if you were alluding to that or if that was what you meant by that comment.
Yeah, I don't have it on me, but I'm sure that the FBI has per population what the recommended staffing levels would be for officers. At least they have in the past. I don't necessarily know whether that still exists.
Okay. Just another follow-up, if I may. When you were talking, you were using school unit, traffic unit, sometimes those two interchangeably. So back to the traffic unit, which I think you know and many others here know is a particular interest of mine, because I think it is a very significant concern, and statistically, we're much more likely to be impacted in that way. And I'm wondering if the traffic unit, if your intention is for that to remain intact into the indefinite future as well, or if that was more of a trying things out, see how successful it would be.
No, I think that, what that wasn't a test case. I mean, obviously, if it was not functioning and we didn't feel the need for it, we would kind of look towards devoting the resources elsewhere. But that's a unit that we believe is important enough that it should remain and has become kind of like a staple within our department.
Okay. Another follow-up is, I know in past years you've talked about the vacancies and kind of its impact on doing regional task forces, and narcotics being one example that you've used. Do we have anyone serving right now on any of those?
We do. We have 2 officers right now outside of the agency serving in 2 different regional approaches to crime.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the other follow-up with that is, would there be any impact on that and our ability to participate regionally, which I think is an important thing to do? Would the new school safety unit have any impact on that?
No, I think that's kind of why we're looking to increase the staffing level, to hire these new officers with the specific role that those positions would be dedicated to the schools, so that we don't impact any of our existing programs or take away any of what we believe to be equally important programs that we do now.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, I'm going to ask a couple myself, if I might. First of all, I want to refer to the handout, page 6, if we could, which is, the chart at the bottom is what Mr. Brown referred to earlier. And to Mrs. Albin's point, in her comments, none of these statistics are definitive in and of themselves. What would be helpful for me, if we could, I assume this is just in Excel, an Excel file that was put together?
And I'll ask the captain. Don?
Excel files.
This was,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Can we just expand it out a few columns? What I'd like to know is what the average officers are per mile, what the average officers are per school, what the average officers are per population, and then I'd like to know how we rank against all these other towns in each of those categories. And I'd love to know what the global average is. And again, it's more of a data point than it is anything definitive. But seeing the information laid out like this, it lends itself to be able to say, what's our ranking on these averages per officer? The other item I have is in payroll. I was struck when we were talking about it earlier, overtime, coming in anywhere from 1.8 to 1.9 million on a consistent basis, year after year. Your payroll is roughly $7.8 million, okay? Which, if you did that calculation, comes to about a 24% expense in overtime costs relative to your payroll. I don't believe I'm going to say the next item, but let's set aside the dollars for a minute, okay? And let's talk about the number of hours the officers are working. Is that above, below, or on target with benchmarks? I'm thinking of two things here: efficiency and also safety. So, and I know that's what you guys care about, but I don't know. There's no way for me to know, in my own mind, whether whether we're using enough overtime, which obviously saves money on benefits and other things, whether you're using too much overtime, and how do you, in management of the department, gauge that question to understand whether that's a safety issue for your officers and things like that. That's something that struck me, that 24% number. Was I clear in my question or no?
Kind of, but, so, why don't you give it to me again then? Because,
basically, are you working as much overtime? Is your team,
Yeah.
when evaluated against other departments, working, I feel like the three bears here, right? Just enough overtime, too much overtime, or too little overtime? I mean, how do you gauge, what the amount of overtime your team should be working on in any given year, and what does that do to their safety? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think there's a chart out there that you could compare departments with regards to what you're asking.
Okay.
But
And I know it changes year to year depending on the incidents.
Well, I think the one thing when we look at overtime is that, and the hours that our officers work, we have a maximum number of hours that an officer can work in one period of time. And that's generally a nationwide standard.
And what is that?
16 hours.
16
The
hours at
maximum
any
they
one
can
time.
work is the maximum they can work. That's not saying that they all work 16
Right,
hours.
sure.
But on any one given day, it's a maximum of 16 hours.
And then how much time do they have to be down for after working?
8 hours. 8 hours. Now, that's the maximum they can work. That's not to say that they consistently work 16 hour, 8 off,
Understand.
16 hours. That's the maximum that they can work. And there's a variety of reasons why we do that. Staffing switch-offs and coverage, rather than do a 12-hour shift, if we can keep them for the 4 extra hours, it's easier for us, rather than switching officers in and off the road more times.
Is
And
the
then-
level of overtime a concern for you then?
And then, well, the other part of overtime that where that wouldn't account for would be in times of crisis. So if you
Right.
look at when, our demands for service, and I'll utilize the Hurricane Sandy, at that point, we obviously monitor the amount of hours our officers are working, but there may be officers that were working in excess of 16 hours just based upon the magnitude of what we had to deal with. But that's a rarity, and the other occasions, I can remember as a detective or a detective sergeant working significantly more hours on a homicide investigation where it's time is crucial, so you just continue to work and follow up leads. But we do monitor the amount of overtime that our officers working on a daily basis. But
Now, does that overtime take into account any private duty things they do that they get paid
yeah,
for?
that would include the private duty. It's that, yeah. if
So
they-
the 16 hours is 16 hours, and it includes when they're on the clock doing something versus
regardless of
when-
whether it's in-house work or outside services work, road job or something, that's a 16-hour that they would work.
Okay.
But I don't have a, I don't know where I would find something to say whether we're comparable to other departments with the amount of hours that they work.
I'm just thinking of the fact that these can be such stressful jobs, and you add a plethora of hours onto a very stressful situation, what does that do? And what does that do to the management of the department? So that was the reason for my question. So, do we have any other questions for the police department?
Could I just go to, I mean, it's.
You sure can.
And we didn't have an opportunity to talk to the first selectman about that when we were preparing our budget, and this is just a minor thing, but, I mean, it is still, I mean, I don't think any dollars when you start talking about it. If you turn to the one line item, 55,400, it's advertising.
Yep.
We utilize that advertising money, and we never really got a chance to finalize this with the first selectman. We utilize that overtime money, I mean, the advertising money, the $3,500, generally when we do exams. So we advertise, we want to get the word out that we're hiring officers. We've just contracted with the Connecticut Chiefs of Police Association, so they're going to handle that advertising, and we're going to sign up with them to do the testing. So we're going to become part of a consortium of, it's not going to change the amount of time. It may have an effect, we don't know yet. But the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association is now moving forward collectively with assisting all departments on testing. So it would take away the need to advertise. So I don't necessarily think we're ever going to need that money to advertise for testing again. So although it is a small dollar amount, it would remain there unless we just do something to take it out. I don't necessarily think its purpose is ever going to be utilized again. So $3,500 is something that we should probably just erase from the budget.
Thank you for your
Or
contribution.
reassign it somewhere else if you want within our budget.
Thank you for your contribution. Any other questions? Mr. Brown?
If we're going to move on to capital outlay? Or do you
Yes,
wanna-
please, anywhere you want in this budget.
Okay. So on page 182, the request this year is for 10 marked patrol cars, but and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the usual request is 8?
Yeah, the usual request is 12.
Oh, 12?
Yeah, we've consistently, well, our mark had been for many, many years 12 patrol cars, and we find that replacing the 12 patrol cars every year is adequate and consistent. What has happened over the last several years is that we've been cut 1 or 2 patrol cars consistently, pretty much. So although we always ask for 12, we seem consistently now to go down to the 10 mark. We're still at the 12 mark. The reason we're going to the 10, we're coming in with the 10 mark is twofold. One is acknowledging the fact that we may have to make a few sacrifices. It may not seem like a lot, but why not come in trying to be reasonable? And number two is, if you recall, over the years, or over the last 2 years, we've transformed our patrol car status. If you recall, Ford was no longer making the Crown Vic, So we had some concerns about the vehicles. And there was a little bit of a delay in which vehicle we were going to, because Ford was delayed in making their new Ford Interceptor. So if you now see around town, you see the black vehicles with the white graphics on it. Those are the new Ford Interceptors. So those are the vehicles that we're moving forward with. So when we got these vehicles in, we feel that 10 vehicles now would be adequate, because we've just gotten this fleet in. So we're starting to replace our fleet. The benefit of going to those Ford Interceptors as opposed to the Chevy Impalas, which we were going to go to, and we actually purchased one thinking that was the route we were going to go to, because Ford did not come out with the Interceptor when we had to make the decision for the Chevy that we bought. Ford Interceptors are all-wheel drive. So it eliminates some of the need for chains on the vehicles, some of the overtime that would be incurred by our mechanic coming in to put the chains on the vehicles. And also, if you notice that the graphics have changed on our vehicle, again, not a big deal, but people might wonder why they're black with now the white as opposed to what our police vehicles used to look like. They're cheaper if we do them that way. I think we saved a little bit of money, and I don't have the figures in front of us, but we saved a little bit of money by going to the black, solid black with the white graphics as opposed to getting them painted up. So that's why we're coming in with the 10 cars.
And how's it doing fuel?
I don't know. I will ask Sergeant Calamaris.
Because they're all-wheel drive, they're about the same on fuel efficiency.
Go to the microphone, please, so they can get you on.
Because they're all-wheel drive now, they're about the same on fuel efficiency, as opposed to but the technology is much greater in the new vehicles.
What is the same? What do I get per gallon, do you know?
I think 16 to 19, 19 highway, 16 city.
Okay.
Just one more thing about the cars that's important to note is when you start talking about officers working a lot of hours in their safety, this, the Crown Vic patrol car that was a staple really in law enforcement for a long time, you'd see them on any of the highways you go on, that was really 1972 technology. So we now have vehicles that operate safer, can handle better in the winter, and offer protection to the officers that were not seen in the Crown Vic. So we've really found a vehicle that I think nationwide people are happy with, but it also handles better. It's technologically advanced, so it operates smoother, and it really provides a level of protection that our officers didn't have in the Crown Vics, just simply because they were 1972 technology.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Leclerc.
Are these all standard police cars or are some SUVs?
Yeah, that's a good point too. Is that the Ford company, when they made the Ford Interceptor, they made the base model, and they allow us now to either go with the sedan, or you'll see black now with SUV. So the same platform for both vehicles. It's just a question of whether or not you go with the sedan model or with the SUV model. This past year, we bought 4 and 4. So that's why you start to see the sedans out there, and now you see 4 SUVs. The reason we went with half and half, I mean, they're the same tires, they're the same everything, so it didn't matter. It's just the size difference. Was we didn't know which vehicle we were going to utilize. Obviously, the SUV provides a little bit, it's a little advantageous to us. One of the reasons, and one of the downsides of this new vehicle is, it is a lot smaller interior and comfort-wise inside, as opposed to the Crown Vics. So we didn't necessarily know how some of our larger officers were going to adapt to being 8 hours in a patrol vehicle that's smaller. So we bought 4 of the SUVs. The benefit of the SUV, besides the officer room inside it, because you got to remember, it's not just a vehicle, it has equipment in it, plus the officers have gun belts and equipment on the side, which makes it difficult when they're in the seats. The SUV, the advantages to the SUV are also that a lot of the equipment that we store in our vehicles is in the trunks of the vehicles. These trunks are smaller than the Crown Vics were. The SUV opens up a whole new realm of possibilities of what resources we can put in the hands of our officers at the time that they need them. The more things that we're very happy with the SUVs, needless to say. The more things we can put in a patrol vehicle for our officers at the time they need it, the more prepared they are. We've been limited with our ability to do that until these SUVs have come out. So right now, with regards to the new vehicles for next year, we're still determining whether or not we go with the SUV model or whether we go with the sedan model. That answers the question, I think.
Okay. Is there a price difference between the two?
Yep, there's a $1,300 difference in cost. The SUV would be $1,300 more expensive.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we'll go to the public about the police department budget. Would anybody like to make a comment? Please come up to the microphone, identify yourselves, and no questions, please. Mr. Dwyer, welcome.
I rise to speak from two perspectives, one as chair of the Board of Education and one as a private citizen. I want to first thank the Board of Finance for the amount of time they spent talking to the police department about school safety and school security. I just want to thank you for doing that. Second, I also want to publicly thank the police chief not only for their ongoing and his staff's ongoing support of public safety in our school, but encourage your support of his budget from that perspective. The one thing that he did not yet comment on is that in addition to the surveys, he has had his staff go to PTA meetings. And as I said to Lieutenant Perez, where I attended one of the meetings, he was scary enough without going overboard to help people understand that there's a change of culture that has to happen relative to public building safety. So that's my chair of the Board of Education's comment. As a citizen who happens to be on the board, at the time we passed the budget on the school board, we were unaware that Mr. Tetreault and the police chief were planning on recommending the thoughtful approach, as I think Mr. DeWitt said, to enhance school safety. So our board has not taken a position on this, but just as an individual, I hope that you will support the expansion of the offices for school safety, because I think it'll be very important to our parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Lieutenant Perez, it's nice to know the Board of Education thinks you're scary enough.
Thank you. Pamela Iacono. I'm here tonight as a parent and a member of the Board of Education to ask you to please support the new unit that the police department is recommending for school safety. I think it's really important in giving everything that's going on right now, even though this is a rather large budget request coming through overall. I think this is something that absolutely needs to get done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Anything on the police department budget? Before you gentlemen leave, I just wanted to comment on the chief's opening remarks regarding the efforts of our employees, not just in the police department, but in all the town departments over the last 12 months. A lot of times it's easy to forget how hard people work. Day to day when they're doing their jobs, if their jobs are done well, you don't notice them. That's part of what the position is. They just kind of blend into the background and things kind of work. It's only when things go wrong that you either notice what they did or perhaps wasn't getting done. From the vantage point of the honor and the privilege to serve on these boards, you get to work closely with the employees, not just the chief of police and the department heads, but some of the employees on a day-to-day basis. And you get to see how hard they work. And when you go through a budget process and you realize it's a service organization and that the vast majority of your costs are salary costs and benefit costs and the items that we have to deal with, sometimes it's got to be hard being an employee and listening to that and sometimes you lose sight of the fact that these are people's lives, their livelihoods, and what they take great pride in. So I think I encourage all our town boards as we discuss this to remember that and to show the due respect to our town employees in our public comments and our public sentiments. And I want to specifically say, and I think I can speak for our entire board on this, that our discussions, albeit difficult at times, are never meant to display a lack of respect or gratitude to all the town employees for what they do on a day-to-day basis, and particularly in times of great need, as we've gone through in the last year in the community. And if you could express that back to your teams, I would be grateful, and I think I can speak for our board when I'd say that we would all be grateful for that. So, Mr. Tetra?
And Mr. Chair, if I might, I want to thank you for pointing that out. I think that this year, probably better than most, we've seen police, fire, DPW go through all that, but also all the town departments. And one small example of not only what our departments are doing for our town, but it was pointed out to me that some of our ECC people went up to Newtown to help give their EC people a break over the holidays so they could get some time off in that very traumatic time. So our folks are reaching out and looking at the larger sense of community in terms of how to help out, and really an example to all of us on how to look at that. But I want to thank you for your recognition and your comments of their efforts.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? All right. At this point, I'd like to say thank you for your time and your preparation. And I'm going to ask that we take a 5-minute break. My apologies. I had hoped to get through animal control before we did that, but we just can't. It's 2.5 hours. Thank you. The department is animal control. Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again.
Hi, it's Paul Miller, Animal Control.
All right, so this budget is going down by 1.6% with a department request that was a little bit high, but it's been pared back by the first selectman to the tune of a capital outlay, which I think was a new van. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any comments you'd like to make before we go to questions and answers?
Just that the basic budget request reflects, in the operational budget, just reflects some minor housekeeping. There's no cuts that we made there that are drastic in nature, and that it was agreed upon us, and it's okay for that. The van, I realize these are difficult times, and we wanted to throw it out there. We feel that it's getting old, but it is up to the Board of Finance and the First Selectman is whether we have the funding to replace that or not. So it's out there that it is getting old, and that was our request.
Thank you. Now, how, to the Finance Department, before we go any further, how are the salaries handled in this? Is this one of those situations where we don't have salaries embedded in the budget? But are they embedded in the current year budget and not next year's budget?
This is the same as the ECC. No, this. No. It's not? Sorry. Linda, no.
Yeah, none of the contracts have settled, so nothing has changed from the...
Okay, so year over year, right, it's not in 2013,
Right,
and it's not in projected 2014.
correct.
Yes, simply, it's not on this page.
Yep, it's in the contingency accounts.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. So the run rate of this department will be different in future years. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Miller, that you want to say, or can I turn over to the board for questions? Or Chief McNamara, do you have anything?
No, just, maybe just if Paul wants to go into a little detail about the van with regards to why it was put in there in the first place, why the new one.
The request of the van came through, basically my experience with the van and the police mechanic. When the police mechanic notices that a vehicle is starting to fail, he will request that we, the chief for the police cars, me for the animal control vehicle, ask for a new vehicle. In the recent past, we've had major transmission problems. One problem that was actually under warranty, so that was repaired, and then we've had further problems. we had a problem with a door that has to be repaired next year. During one of the past storms, I think it was Irene, you know when you open the car door and the wind takes the door, well, it ripped the door open and cracked the door frame. We've had it welded a couple of times, but it's getting to be unsafe. You get wet when it rains, so we're going to have to replace that door. The mechanic has also found front-end problems. It's very common with the long length of the vans, and he has to do some front-end damage repair, and that's it, pretty much in a nutshell.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other questions, comments, concerns, board members? Mrs. McCarthy V.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, like my colleagues who thanked the other members of the police department, would like to thank you in animal control during the storm, well, Sandy, that particular storm. The work that you did in terms of the sheltering, I know, made a big difference to many residents and allowed them the freedom to leave their homes and be in safety with their pets. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, and thanks from all the staff, the entire shelter group that was down there.
Anybody else have anything on this budget? Seeing nothing, we'll go to the public on this. Any comments from the public? None. Back to the board? Nothing. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And thank you for your patience tonight while we went through the rest. Good night, gentlemen, and good luck with the storm this evening. Take care. Thank you, Chief. All right. We'll go to the health and welfare area of our budget. For the night, we have two departments. Department number 6010, which is the Department of Health. Hello.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for coming back, Mr. Clay.
I, too, like Lieutenant Perez, often get the comment that I'm scary enough.
That's just when you feel roses.
So I can sum up my budget request as succinctly as possible. We've essentially come in at a 1.5% increase, which is solely attributable to salary and benefits. Our actual discretionary spending, the items that I have control over, is actually being reduced by $4,400. We've reduced line items in the budget by $11,300. We have taken some of that reduction and applied it to three line items: fees and professional services, $3,000; education and memberships, $3,000; and $900 for fuel. And these are just to reflect costs that we've been incurring lately, and also in the fees and professional services, we're trying to provide some funding to support clerical support for the Board of Condemnation, which is has seen an increase since the storm in the amount of clerical demands being placed upon our department. Our department, our sole full-time secretary for a department of over 50 people, bears the clerical responsibilities for the Board of Condemnation. So we're trying to provide some funding to support some clerical support for the Board of Condemnation, which also oversees blight.
Are those funding for condemnation for that? Is that possible for reimbursement from FEMA on that? Given that I'm assuming the excess workload is storm-related.
I think we're beyond the time frame at this point, you know, being that we haven't made the request yet, and being that the clerical support being provided is provided during normal working hours. It just is being, you know, it's not adding to any hours.
That's the key. With few exceptions, FEMA generally reimburses for overtime. There's certain exceptions within DPW, specifically with respect to debris cleanup, that we can get straight time or normal time on. But beyond that, it's really the overtime that reimbursement.
That's interesting. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. DeWitt.
This isn't actually a question for Mr. Cleary's health. It's a question for, I guess, probably for Linda and Mr. Mayor, because it should have been asked in the last one. Fuel, are we as we've had issues in other years, right? The fuel budget is constant across all the departments this year, and it's Twig's rate, right? Okay, great.
And just to be clear, the unit price is constant.
Yes, that's the best I can ask for. It hadn't been before, right?
The units may change, the number of units.
Long as there's a quantity of gallons times the same number, that's all I was, right. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Mr. Brown. Assuming you're done, Mr. DeWitt, you're on.
I am, thank you.
And, you know, and maybe I'm missing something, the health insurance, 52,100, how does that go down 7%?
He had an additional nurse, an additional person, employee, choose a stipend in lieu of health insurance.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey?
This is actually probably a question for Mr. Mayor and Ms. Gardner. So that clearly saved some costs. And how often does that happen? What's our incidence across other departments?
I think we have 5 total.
We have 5 total, 1 from last year.
Okay. And how do we communicate that option, or do we incentivize that, or how?
Be marketing it.
Yes, I mean, obviously, families are going to make decisions based on what's most ideal and profitable for their families, but is there any kind of incentive or communication about that?
I have no idea exactly what HR does to make sure everybody's aware of it, but the program is a $2,500 stipend. If the person opts out of the health care plan, we pay them $2,500.
Thank you.
Can we, let's make a note of that. Yeah, that might be something to hear more about, and what we're doing to manage that, and what we're doing to incentivize that. What the economics are about it.
Well, the average cost per contract, per employee in the town is about $22,000.
Sounds like a pretty good deal.
So,
For us.
you know, so theoretically, from that perspective, it's a very good deal. However, if the person was in the plan and never went to the doctor, they come out ahead. Because there'd be no claims in the claims experience, and so there'd be no expense, and we're paying them $2,500.
We're also paying some amount of premium for them anyway for the stop loss, no?
No, because they're not in the plan at all.
That's only if they opt out.
That's what I'm saying, they get the $2,500.
Right. But what I'm saying is it's a good deal for the town if they take the $2,500 versus.
If they were going to use the services.
But even if they weren't going to use the services or didn't plan on it, we're still paying an insurance premium on it.
Premium, no, but we're not premium-based. We're experience rating, whether it's stop loss or non-stop loss, is driven by your experience.
I get it.
So therefore, they have no experience so if you add 10 more bodies with the same experience, the cost would be the same.
We had 10 more bodies with the same experience.
With zero incremental change in experience.
Way too esoteric.
In other words, I don't see if you add, in other words, if you add 10 bodies tomorrow, you're going to increase your expected expense going forward. However,
But if they opt out, you're going to take it
but if
out.
they were in the plan and they had no experience during that, say there's 2 people in a healthcare insurance plan, one person uses, I mean, 2 is a ridiculous number, but you have 100 people, 2 people who had no experience drop out of the plan, your cost, your total experience expectation would be the same.
On the experience-based side of it.
Correct.
But there's also other costs related to it, no?
No, because the administration, et cetera, is related to volume of claims, so that's all claims volume oriented.
I'd like to see that. I was not aware of that. Doesn't necessarily make sense to me, but.
So how many claims, they charge us.
Well, I know what it means by
based
how many
upon how many claims they think they're going to.
I know what
Yeah.
volume of claims means.
Yeah.
I'm saying it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me that that's how we're paying it.
May I follow
Well,
up?
that's, I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, that's how they don't charge us for each individual claim, but that's how their rates are set internally inside the insurance company, is what I'm saying. But yes.
That doesn't make sense.
So I guess I just want to comment. Chances are good that most employees will be using some kinds of services, and I think, I understand you're making a point about cost, but I agree with Chairman Flynn. It would be interesting to me to be able to look at this in a few different ways, and
Yeah, I would
it just seems-
anticipate that, I'm sorry, I would anticipate that the persons who are not taking the insurance are eligible under someone else's health care insurance.
I would assume the same. And I would also assume that no employee whose partner or spouse has a worse health insurance plan is going to opt out. So I recognize that there are some limitations, but another follow-up question. The $2,500, who and how does that number get determined? Is that something that is
Well,
decided
that's the
by
point, right.
the finance department or with the first selectman? Or is that simply past history?
That's past history. I really don't know it's been there
And that's, I
for a
think,
while.
I think this needs to be reviewed. The
Yeah.
other thing is, what doesn't make sense is your expense here is 659,000 going down from 710, which, if the answer was one person opted out and took a stipend, we just saved $40,000.
Well, one person, maybe with family members as well.
That's fine, it's $40,000.
Yeah, no, it's actually 56,000, because you
Whatever.
go from the
Yeah.
12 actual of 716
Right,
to the,
right, so something doesn't
yeah,
pass the
so,
smell
yeah,
test there.
right. So it's definitely, I mean, it's more than one person changing.
Right, exactly. The stop-loss.
Hey, may I just,
Right.
I know.
Mr. Flynn,
Yeah, what else? Anything else?
may I
We
just,
could do that offline. Please go ahead, Ms.
just a follow-up comment? I recognize that this is for many departments, though. I think it's appropriate that our health department is here for the health insurance conversation. So.
There you
Yes, she is.
go. Okay,
Sorry, two people in his department.
okay, it's still $40-some-odd thousand dollars. $50,000. It goes against what Mr. Mayor was saying.
No, the average is $23,000 per person approximately.
Right, that's $46,000. But under your point is, we wouldn't have any savings. Right. Right. I just think we need to look at it and see if that stipend should be raised and you can save more money. That's it.
No, it's a good idea.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. DeWitt?
Not to belabor that, but what budget does the stipend get paid out of? Your budget?
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
So
In this
under
line?
that same line will be offset by $5,000 because it's, okay.
Thank you. Mrs. McCarthy-Vahey, I
On a
feel like I'm
sep-
playing ping pong here.
On a separate item, one secretary, how does that work out for your department? Obviously, you're looking at, and mentioned the increased fees and professional services, but just overall, in general, I know I've had some conversations with some members of the department in terms of marketing and materials. Do you find it's sufficient for what you're doing?
I think so. I mean, we made a decision. We have, one full-time secretary, we have two part-time secretary, one part-time data clerk, and one part-time nursing administrative specialist. It's working. We had made a decision as a department a couple years ago to take a part-time nurse up to a full-time nurse in lieu of a retired secretary going to a part-time status. So we made these trade-offs to provide better coverage in the schools and took a hit, where essentially the nursing staff is covering their own phones, covering the phones without any kind of clerical support for a portion of the day. So, but I think, we're functioning, we're trying to be efficient as we can, and I think some of these minor adjustments of a few $1,000s to provide some relief is what we're trying to achieve in terms of to make the department function more efficiently.
Well, and I just want to say thank you for that.
Mr. DeWitt, are you going to hold serve, or are you going to?
No, I'm going to 40 love.
Okay.
Concede the point.
Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns from board members on this budget at this point in time? Seeing none, we'll go to the public for any comments. None. The board, nothing. Thank you, and thanks for all your work
Thank you very
during
much.
during the storms and all that. I had the opportunity to go down to the shelter and all that, and your team and Mrs. Peterson and all the rest of them, they did a great job. So thank you
very much.
All right, let's go to department number 6050, Human and Social Services, and we have a new face here this evening. Ladies, welcome.
I'm Selma Cohen, Chairman of the Human Services Commission. Just for a moment, I want to thank you again as Board of Finance members for the opportunity January 30th, when you listened patiently and learned and asked questions from the Top 10 committee that had worked so hard. And they valued the time in front of you, and it meant to them that their work was validated, that it was significant enough to warrant the opportunity to be here on the 30th. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce the brand-new Mr. Tetro appointee, Director of the Human Services and Social Services Department in the town of Fairfield, Terry Geoghegan.
Thank you and welcome.
And Terry comes to us with stellar reviews from Westport. In fact, the first selectman in Westport came up to me at a recent meeting and begrudged me for having Fairfield having stolen her away from Westport, where she'd been for the last 20 years.
It's true.
Well, welcome.
Nice to be here, thank you.
And I'm sure you have this memorized, right?
I think I'm ready.
Okay. Do you have any opening remarks that you ladies would like to make before we go to questions?
It's day number 5 for me on the job, so I'm really just taking it all in and kind of assessing the needs as well as the staffing and all that they're doing. So that being said, I think I'm ready for whatever your questions are.
Great. Thank you. Can I open it up to questions? Mr. DeWitt?
Quick question, I guess, for Mr. Tetro. Was there a need last year for this is Senior Services Director under the, right? Was there a need for this position last year? Because I don't remember discussing this in the budget. Or was this just is this a new need that was filled this year?
Okay. The Senior Services, or Senior Center Committee, also known as the Top 10 Committee, came before this board within the last month and gave a presentation of their evaluation when they went out and visited a number of senior centers around the state with their recommendations and suggestions on how we can make the senior center more functional and more effective for our senior population, and how we can grow the use of that senior center population. They recommended 2 staff changes in that report. One was a senior center director that would report to the human services director, and one was a part-time receptionist to help with registering members as they come into the center, and also to make the new computer system that the senior center has had donated to them more effective, to make sure the members are entered in that, and to let us capture member information as well as services used.
So they made a recommendation, and Mr. Polito just whispered to me that I wasn't, probably a school commitment at that point. So they came in and recommended a $84,000 increase to this budget, because those two numbers together is about $84,000.
Correct.
And that's a appointed position? Does that tree up through?
That's an employee, so it would be hired like we hire every other employee.
I'm just trying to remember, we had a discussion one time about how new employees get on
Well, we
the
approve
books,
it.
if you will, right?
Right.
So did this board approve the hiring of the two people?
That's the process we're going through now.
Oh.
If you don't
We
approve...
haven't approved, so
It's
if
in the-
we
it's-
pass this budget as it stands today,
Correct. It's in the
this
proposed...
nice lady's hired, is
Yeah,
that right?
It's in the proposed budget.
Got it, that's what I was trying to get,
And,
okay.
and not to be too specific, but we don't know if the new senior center director would be a lady or not.
Right.
My apologies, I was looking at that nice lady.
Yeah, just to-
So, got it.
But she's the head of
And-
the entire...
Terry is the human services director. She's responsible for our social services function as well as our senior center. This would be a new position coming in reporting to Terry that would be in charge of just the senior center.
Oh, I'm
It's-
sorry.
it's
So
a
I'm-
typical-
This is the Director of Human Services.
Yeah, it's a typical model that is used at a number of senior centers and in senior services functions within other towns.
Got it.
And Terry's come to us from Westport, where they have effectively their human and services director has a senior center person reporting to her, the teen center person reporting to her, and the social services director reporting to her.
Got it.
So they
I'm-
have three staff
I'm-
at the next
I'm
line.
clear now, thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns? Where's your office?
Over at the Senior Center in Mona Terrace?
So you are located over there on pretty much a full-time basis?
Yes.
Okay.
Monday through Friday.
Okay. So that hasn't changed? Right, okay. Other questions on this item? All of these items, Mr. Tetro, any increase in this budget, any change in this budget is based on review of the top 10 list? The top 10 report?
Those two staffing items were respect to that. There's also an increase in advertising
Yeah.
to kind of help with that also, in terms of part of the goal is to, one of the things that came out of the survey of seniors
Yeah.
was that there was a lack of awareness in the community. So there are a lot of things we can do that don't cost money, so it's not we're not relying on just advertising, but the idea was to increase the advertising a bit, and you can see that increase from $1,000 to $3,000
Right.
to affect that.
Now, if I recall, Mrs. Grace, who just retired, she was semi-part-time, was that it? Was she 4 days a week? I can't recall.
She had an agreement that was here when I got here, that had her working on-site 21 hours a week and off-site an unspecified number of hours.
Okay. And Terry, you're full-time now, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
On-site, full-time.
okay.
All right. The idea is that the senior center is a great asset, and I don't think we've been using that asset enough, so we've had
No, I
unused
remember the
capacity.
Yeah, I remember the presentation. I'm just trying to
Okay.
figure out what we're
Yeah.
doing with the staff.
Yeah, the other piece we did in the budget is there was, part of the request was for $60,000 for an additional bus. We have pulled that out of this request as we evaluate our bus service and what we need. There's also been a delay in getting a bus, so there will be a new bus coming in, but that's already been ordered.
Okay.
And it's part of our plan was to kind of spread out the buses so we don't develop a cliff that we have had in the past, so that we don't do more than one a year, except in exceptional circumstances, so we don't run into that problem.
Thank you, Mr. Tetra. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this budget? Mr. DeWitt?
But on the bus, didn't we put money in this year's budget for half the bus? I recall last year funding half a bus for something.
Yes, but we use that money to order the bus. So we put, for lack of a better term, in the current fiscal year, we bought the second half of the bus. In the prior fiscal year, we bought the first half of the
Okay,
bus.
so last year we put the last half of the bus in. I got it, I got it, okay.
Fiscal 12, we put in half. Fiscal 13, we put in half. We put it on order. It hasn't arrived
More than
yet.
half, I couldn't process it. Okay, thank you.
Are there more things we can split in half?
Not unless you're volunteering.
I'm cheap. All right. Any other questions, comments from board members? Seeing none, I'll go to the public on this item.
Let me just throw in there, in the image of what the top 10 committee wants and found in the public.
Excuse me, Selma, if you could speak into the microphone, please.
Turn on channel 68.
No.
You'll see the latest video of the Fairfield Senior Center.
I believe it's channel
really good. It's a week old.
78?
79.
79, I think, well, whatever. And it's the senior center reviewed, visited, with participants being interviewed. It's really good, and it is inspired by the top 10 and the survey saying we need to get out there and grow.
Well, thank you.
All right. The senior center group worked with the Fair TV in terms of putting that together and getting it out there as an explanation and a chance for not only seniors, but everybody to see what the senior center is all about.
Great, great. That's good news. Any comments from members of the public? Please. Please come on up, state your name and your address, please, for the record. Yes, Jerry? Okay.
Good evening. Happy to be here. My name is Jerry Stolman. I'm a resident of Fairfield at 71 Somerset Avenue. I'm very happy to be here to support the request for the expenditures for the Senior Center and Human Services. I'm also here as a member of the Affordable Housing Committee. In the last 6 months or so, working on the Affordable Housing Committee, I've spent a little more time, significantly more time, getting in touch with the needs of seniors, including housing, and I've gotten more in touch with what's going on at the Senior Center. And I took advantage of Gerard's work behind the camera on Fair TV, and I did personally view the top 10 committee report, which I found extremely impressive. Coming in touch with the needs and both the strengths and needs of the seniors in town, who represent, I believe, about 15% of our population. I think the request as supported by the report of the top 10 committee has got to be the most convincing and complete and professional report that I think may come before you in terms of a request for an increase in expenditure. So if you haven't been able to take a look at that, it's also available online, and it's just extremely impressive. So I wish you luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Best practices, that's really what that.
Selma, if you could use the mic.
Sorry. When they toured, they told you that in January, when they toured the various senior centers in the state of Connecticut, I think there were 5 different centers that they saw, they came back with best practices and economies and different ways of approaching the same projects. So it is an extremely valuable document for us to pursue now with enough staff in order to make it facilitated.
Thank you. Mrs. McCarthy-Vega.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to formally welcome, again, as we did yesterday, the Board of Selectmen, Mrs. Giegengak, and I've learned how to spell your name, actually.
That's right. That's a dangerous thing.
I just wanted to take this opportunity to just emphasize the human and social services. I think a lot of times that we have had a lot of focus on the senior center, which is important, but that the mission of this department is more all-encompassing, and I look forward to your experience and bringing that forward here, because I know there have been a number of areas here in town that have potential for some wonderful new perspectives, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chair, just to add on to what Kristen said, the social services group had representatives at the shelter during Storm Sandy, and that was another component of our services to folks who were displaced, and it really helped out in terms of helping understand their needs and managing them while they're there, but also in managing their exit from there back to their home.
Thank you, Mr. Tetron. We wish you the best of luck, and we welcome you, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming out late on an evening for us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. All right, that concludes our budget presentations for the night. We did get some follow-up documents that were distributed by the Finance Department earlier this week. In fact, I think it might have been yesterday. I don't know that any of us have really had the time to go through those documents. What I was going to propose was, Mr. Mayor, if you just want to, if you have any commentary you want to make, fine, but I'd rather go through those documents in any amount of detail after the board has had the opportunity to look at them. So do you have anything you'd like to say?
One very minor thing, thank you, Mr. Chair, is there is one kind of, I won't call it a typo because it's not actually a typo, but a sentence with the phrase is incomplete. One of the requests from the board was look into ED 001, which item 14 on the package is, and at the end, there's a statement that the net ED 001 is 4716. When you read that, $4,716,000, what that should read is the in-kind services contribution to the ED-001 is $4,716,000.
Thank you for
So
that
it says,
clarification.
last paragraph, item 14.
No, thank you very much for that clarification. It's an important one. Any board members have any other business or any other comments I'd like to make before we adjourn for the evening? Seeing none, can I get a motion? Mr. Brown, I'm going to go with a second with Mr. DeWitt. All in favor? Those opposed? Abstentions? We're done for the evening. Thank you, everybody. Safe home.